As per the definition of the law, the offense of has always been something that a man can commit on a woman. Let's take first the Ambani family. Obviously, touch wood, we want the couple to be happily married ever after. Right. Assume as a case study, right? If Radhika madam at any point of time says, I want a divorce, okay, to what extent will she be able to get any money?
Do you think that laws are unjustly biased against men?
I would in fact agree with you that in the pursuit of men's rights activism, a lot of women's rights have been diluted to a significant extent. When a man asks me, what are the chances of me getting custody of the child? I tell them point blank. Every single day, the police manufacture evidence, manufacture testimonies, hide evidence produced by the falsely accused person in whatsoever case, be it dowry, murder, anything. So right now, inflicting trauma upon an animal, I believe is not a punishable offense right now.
What are you saying?
There are gaps in the laws of all sorts, right?
Hi Amish, I have to do something very essential before we start the podcast. भाई मैं ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है बिकॉज मैं दिखाना नहीं चाहता मैं कौन से धर्म से हूँ. It's not apparent from my name. तो मैं संविधान को हाथ में रख के, जिसको बहुत सारी पार्टीज ने ये बोला कि ये खतरे में है, ये बोलता हूँ कि इस पॉडकास्ट में जो कुछ बोलूँगा झूठ के अलावा कुछ नहीं बोलूँगा. अमीश की अगर वो करना चाहें तो कर सकते हैं. मैंने अपना पैक
We've always been tasked with upholding the constitution to the best of our abilities, so कर लेंगे हम भी.
So I'm actually devil's advocate with an actual advocate on record, Supreme Court lawyer and Better Call Saul Maximus for India. और वेरी फेमसली दिल्ली की डिवोर्स मार्केट के सबसे उभरते हुए चेहरे, लोगों के बंधन को तोड़ के आदमी औरत को बढ़िया पैसे दिलाने वाले जो व्यक्ति हैं वो अमीश अग्रवाल हैं. Bro, there are many tangents we can take from here. I guess probably the first one that I want to discuss today, and mostly because 162 साल से 162 years से IPC के कानून देश के अंदर लगते हैं, लागू होते हैं. सबको पता होता है अटेम्प्ट टू मर्डर हो गया, मर्डर हो गया, हमें सेक्शंस रटे हुए होते हैं, इवन पीपल हु आर सिविलियंस.
राइट.
ऑल ऑफ अ सडन द गवर्नमेंट हैज नाउ इंट्रोड्यूस भारतीय न्याय संहिता या संहिता BNS फॉर लॉयर्स ऑन द अदर साइड. व्हाट इज द इम्प्लीकेशन ऑफ दिस? व्हाट हैव यू हैड टू अनलर्न एंड व्हाट डू सिविलियंस नीड टू नो अबाउट?
So I'll be very honest, I've not really even gone through the 3 acts properly till now. And there's a reason why. The whole debate started several months ago. Then they took a lot of time to implement. Finally, the government said we are notifying them to come into operation from 1st of July 2024, which is very recent. Now again, me and my entire team till now have had very few occasions in the past couple of weeks to actually deal with the material provisions. However, couple of new things have come up, so very recently my team member was asking me, an associate, whether a case which has already been undergoing. Now, the offense will be of IPC, sure, the Indian Penal Code, which was in existence prior. But what about the procedure which is now applicable in an old case? So I told this junior that according to my understanding, this is a couple of days ago, I told him, according to my understanding, even if the offense is of a prior time and will be tried under the Indian Penal Code, however, the applicable criminal procedure will now be not under the criminal procedure code as it existed earlier, but now under the BNSS. I also forget, but I short में BNSS.
वैसे क्रिमिनल प्रोसीजर का मतलब क्या हुआ? फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर आपने किसी को अरेस्ट करा, आपने पहले उनको बताया एज अ पुलिसमैन आपको क्यों अरेस्ट करा गया, आपकी चार्जशीट तैयार होती है, फिर वो डिसाइड करते हैं कि भाई आपको कुछ दिनों की रिमांड होगी या जुडिशियल कस्टडी होगी. ये तो हो गया प्रोसीजर एक, राइट? किसी भी एक पर्टिकुलर क्राइम के लिए फॉलो तो यही करते हैं, राइट?
करेक्ट.
हाउ डज दिस चेंज विद द BNS?
So BNS is the newer version of the Indian Penal Code. The Indian Penal Code contained all of the offenses. You do this act, that's a punishable offense, and this is the time period for which you will go to jail, or the fine that you will pay, or any other thing, right? The definitions of all these crimes were given. Then in what way will a certain thing be done to make it an offense? Those are all detailed in the Indian Penal Code, which is now, I would say, 95% preserved with the BNS. What you just mentioned, all of the things were part of the criminal procedure code. So if you do a particular act, you will go to jail, or this will be the punishment, is all mentioned in the IPC and now the BNS. But who will investigate? Who will conduct the trial? How will every single thing happen, right? The police, the judges, the advocates, the accused person, the victim. everybody and how they operate is all earlier dictated by the Criminal Procedure Code and now under the BNSS.
न्यूज़ के अंदर ये भी आ रहा था कि अब पुलिस को गवर्नमेंट कोशिश कर रही है कि आप ट्राई करो थ्रू डमी FIRs and doing drills around that. What was the need to change the IPC? या तो कुछ archaic हो गया था ये कुछ ये या फिर it had become difficult to deal with it? What was the real reason?
I have no clue. I must confess. I see that majority of these acts, almost everything has remained the same. There are a few changes which have come up, but majorly a big problem for us is we had, as you mentioned, बच्चे को पता है 420 is cheating, like 302 is, punishment for murder. Now those have all been rejuggled, and now we just have to kind of grapple with it, and we are not able to think as fast on our feet. Now, for example, earlier when it came to client consultations or when it came to discussions with the judge, right, or discussions with other lawyers, it was very quick. We'll just mention the terminology and we'll be like, okay, we moved an application under this. This was what the judge said. This was the particular judgment. And then, we move forward with the discussion. Now we'll have to kind of, take a step back, take a deep breath, and then figure out, okay, what's the new section under which everything has to be done. However, there are a couple of key changes, and especially me when I practice, and I'm looking at the meat of the matter, right? Apart from some cosmetic changes that have been done. For example, just about 2 days back, I was looking at a particular provision under the new law. And so what earlier used to be section 498A, cruelty for the purpose of dowry. Now that cruelty for the purpose of dowry, that section used to be there, 498A, and beneath that section, inside of that section itself, as a second part, used to be the definition clause of what is cruelty. Now in the new act, BNS, the cruelty for purpose of dowry, the section is there. The definition of cruelty is the next section, not in the same section. So, and I believe that it was a goof up. It was not something deliberate.
So what is the implication for something like this?
Nothing. There's no change as such at all. It is just... And I think this is one of the reasons why one aspect is, I believe I've not gone through the clauses properly. The legal profession, the community says that there are a lot of changes which give the police far more unfettered power. I'm yet to examine those. However, one big grouse that a lot of legal practitioners have, now I'm facing it as well. Why do you have to, okay, you made cosmetic changes, but some things seem very irrelevant. For example, here 498A, which now, whatever, you change the section, sure. But it was part of the section. You just did nothing. You changed nothing in the full stop commas. You broke it into two sections instead of one. It seems to be quite irrelevant to me.
Seems like you're writing a CBSE paper in 10th grade where you have to lines में space छोड़ना होता ताकि marks ज़्यादा मिले. No,
perhaps.
It's strange how this is happening. I think I was reading the news and one gentleman from the ruling party said that these laws are from colonial times, so we must change them. Decoloniality की जो बात चल रही है, I'm sure that is a good sentiment. But what you're saying is, because you've worked on the ground, कि अगर सिर्फ cosmetic changes ही हैं, you're basically uprooting an entire legal system, all the pending cases, right? It's like everyone has to go back to the books again, right? Have the books been published?
Practitioner, yeah, I mean, so, the government has done its job. It has published it on what I call to be the Bible for all Indian acts, right? So when you see lawyers carrying these yellow books in the courtrooms, right? They are actually printed by publishers. So there are scopes for mistake. In fact, recently, one of the high courts, I don't remember which one, specifically passed a judgment on its own saying that we have gone through these so-called published bear acts that we call, that are sold everywhere, and people assume them to be correct. But these bear acts, these publishers made several mistakes. So I don't know which high court it was. That high court gave a warning saying that when you refer to these acts, please go to what the government has actually passed and not what has been printed by the publishers. So, further confusion, but that's not really the government's fault. Yeah. However, one thing, if viewers here want to be 100% sure as to what the actual statute says, is best to go to indiacode.nic.in. That is the official website of the government where they publish all their statutes. And that is where you know that this is 100% what is in operation instead of what you will find in some published Bear Act, which you will find in the court complex.
What's a Bear Act?
So we call them Bear Acts. They are basically they are printed by by book publishers. They are unofficial copies. So you have to...
Punji.
Not really. It's basically, the government has passed the law. Now, how do we put it in the hands of the everyday consumer as a legal practitioner? So book publishers, right? They will just print and keep hard copies of these acts which have been passed by the parliament. Sometimes they also include some very handy comments, some say maybe often used judgments they'll also include, but they try to keep them as tight and as concise as possible. And so they print them and for ready reference for lawyers, rather than maybe having an iPad and then you're scrolling on it. And if you don't have an iPad or a computer or whatever, if you want to now access it, either you print it out after going to the website, you print it out and then you staple it together yourself, or you just go and buy that, that what we call it as a bare act, like bare
Correct.
of bereft of anything else, any other details.
I see.
But one thing I would like to mention is, in the middle of the conversation, there are some things in which you said that some things need to be corrected. One thing is that the government, I am yet to figure out the reasoning for this, and in fact, I mean, I also obviously make videos about this stuff. I have not talked about it before, but I think that there is one thing which has been added which is going to be of significant impact in criminal laws in this country, which is Section 69 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which is sex on false promise to marry, right? Now, if we were to kind of talk about it for a minute.
Sure.
Earlier, the punishment used to be under Section 376 of the Indian Penal Code, punishment for rape. And the reason why any person used to, as a sideline, is it okay to go into this or?
Bilkul, 100%. I have so many questions around marital rape today. Anyway, I came stacked with this.
Cool. So earlier, there was the definition of rape under Section 375. And what used to happen was that 375 says without the consent of a woman, if there is sexual intercourse, then that is rape. Punishment was under Section 376. What used to happen was that the judges and the lawyers and the police imported a definition saying that if there was a consent which was taken by making a false promise, which the person at the very time of making the inducement knew it to be false, then at that point of time, even if it is a false promise of, say, marriage, or maybe something else, such as, say, maybe a job promotion or something else for that matter. If a false promise was made and on the basis of that consent to have sexual intercourse was obtained, then because of the operation of another section in the Indian Penal Code, that any consent which is obtained by fraud is no consent. So they imported these two things together and they said that this is the offense of rape, which is punishable under Section 376. Okay, for which there have been tens of thousands of false promise to marry, rape on the false pretext to marry cases which have been registered all over the country in the past.
Without actually inciting forceful penetration.
Correct. Without any physical force. It is only on the basis of, and see, I can understand the reasoning to that to a certain extent. For example, if consent was obtained, but after the person was intoxicated, right? That is again no consent.
Correct.
If consent was obtained, and there is a clause like that, if a consent is obtained that, say, I go up and pose to be Shah Rukh Khan to someone who is completely, who has no idea.
Right.
And I'm saying I am Shah Rukh Khan, and then sexual intercourse takes place.
Yeah.
Right. And the basis for that sexual intercourse was the fact that the lady believed me to be Shah Rukh Khan. So then again, that is fraud, right? So to a certain extent, you can say that consent, or maybe another thing, right?
And this is mostly men giving a fake promise to marry to women. It's not the other way around.
It is never the other way around. The offense of rape has always been something that a man can commit on a woman. It can never.
No, legally, या फिर मतलब आपने cases देखे हैं इतने सारे.
No. As per the definition of the law. No.
What are you saying? You're saying that rape in India,
yes,
in the constitution or in the laws,
not the constitution. Constitution is separate, and the Indian Penal Code exists under the aegis of the constitution, right? So constitution talks about laws which can be passed, who can pass, right?
So there's no female over male rape.
That is correct.
In the law.
Yes. That's always been the case. In the earlier IPC also, in the BNS also, a lot of people have advocated for the fact that that rape should be gender neutral. It can be committed In fact, by a man upon a man can be committed by a woman upon a woman.
That's not covered either?
That's not covered either. It has to be on a woman, that too committed by a man. So if a woman comes and says that I was raped by a woman, and of course it can be done, right? There is no remedy as such. If a man says I was raped by a man or raped by a woman, again, there is no remedy to that effect. Of course, there are other, offenses which can be, this thing, but nowhere in proximity to the level of seriousness that is, the offense of rape. So, for example, if a man comes and says that rape took place upon me, earlier that could be prosecuted under Section 377 IPC, unnatural intercourse, right, without the consent of the person. Because even though the Supreme Court said that homosexuality will not be an offense anymore, however, the court did clarify that this is consensual sexual intercourse. So if there is forcible sexual intercourse, then even then 377 was applicable. However, with the new BNS, they have completely done away with anything similar to Section 377 in the past. And now I wonder, if a man comes and says that I was sexually assaulted by another man or by a woman, perhaps at the most, grievous hurt could be attributed. Which
grievous hurt,
which is nowhere obviously if you think about it, it is nowhere close to the definition of rape. Or in fact, the seriousness is also not attached, because the prescribed punishment for grievous hurt is also far lower in comparison to rape.
What, like a fine or
no. Definitely, imprisonment is there, but it is nowhere close to the seriousness with which this is done. I don't remember the specifics because it's always ongoing.
So to clarify, if a man is beaten to almost a pulp without the attempt to murder necessarily, but बहुत harm पहुंचाया है,
that is correct.
उसकी punishment, and a man who gets sexually assaulted by another man and is raped, sodomized, उसकी punishment same है.
That is correct, yes. So earlier it used to be Section 325 Indian Penal Code, grievous hurt. But so that's a very, it's a good point. If a person is almost beaten to death, then we would like to charge that person with earlier again now, this is the one problem that I face with BNSS. These, there were sections that I used to roll off the top of my tongue. Now it's like, I have to kind of, so earlier Section 307 Indian Penal Code, attempt to murder, is something that, we would charge the person with. So this big, this thing, right? Now, however, after all of this was the old laws. Section 69, right, out of nowhere, I don't know how this came into picture, and we are still kind of trying to figure out what was the intention of the legislature, right? They have offenses of rape, which was already there, has been just neatly imported. Sections have been different. Section 69 is something completely different. They have created a new classification of offense for sexual intercourse in India. They say that Section 69 specifically says that if there was sexual intercourse on the promise of marriage, or perhaps, a job, there are a couple of things which are mentioned, which does not amount to rape. So rape, anyways, the definition is there, and it has a slightly more stringent, I believe, minimum 10 years, but up to life. And I think Section 69, it is up to 10 years. So there's a little bit of classification in terms of the level of seriousness. So they've attributed it, and they've said that one thing is rape where there was no consent, or maybe consent was obtained through fraud. However, they've created this new classification of offense where they say that if there was an inducement of some sort, right, or consent was obtained on some sort of inducement, then that's punished. And that was not rape, right, which they've mentioned. If it was not rape, then also the man can go to, again, man on woman, the man can go to jail under Section 69 of the BNS. Now, one small point that I wanted to make was, which is something that I've been kind of, and, because now this is Vinamre's podcast, so I thought this is the best place to kind of, talk about it in like an open thought. I personally think, because a lot of people on the internet, a lot of men's rights advocates have talked about it, and they've said that this is horrible, that any woman can file any case on any man saying that he promised to marry me, and that's why I had sex with him, which already was happening, by the way, right? But now they say that the scope has been enlarged a little better now. Earlier, they were kind of mixing in two ingredients, and then they were saying, okay, now we are going to charge you with rape. Now, this is, purely he promised marriage, and then I had sex with him, and now he should go to jail. I honestly, personally, because I've thought about it a lot, I think that perhaps, I'm not sure, perhaps it is possible that we might be able to put an end to false promise to marry cases, because we have taken out from the ambit of rape this aspect of false promise to marry. So there has been a kind of separation which has been done. Earlier, the way I see it, earlier if a woman is in the middle of the night kidnapped by somebody and someone forces themselves on the woman, that is as bad as a man and a woman entering into a hotel or a house together. The man says, we're going to get married, and then they have sex together. These are both classified as offenses of an equal nature, which I believe was always improper. Right?
And one is dishonesty, the other is almost bordering on bestiality. आप force कर रहे हो अपना.
Indeed. So I believe now, because there has been a separation, right? And obviously we have to now see to what extent the judiciary, the judges of the Sessions Court, the High Court and the Supreme Court, what kind of a view they have on Section 69 BNS. My hope is that after a few initial rampant arrests in Section 69 BNS for the next couple of months, after that, I believe this separation of these two offenses is going to be in the favor of men, in the sense that at least earlier there was no, these were the same things, right? Grabbing someone from the middle of the street and going consensually into a room together, certain dialogues were exchanged, and then this happened. So now I hope that there is going to be a little bit of a difference a couple of months down the line. I am really hopeful that the courts of law are going to be far more lenient in granting anticipatory bail to a person accused of Section 69 BNS. So those were my thoughts. I have never read them before in front of anybody. This is something that exclusively for Vinamre's podcast.
Wow,
that I
what a scoop! This is the story that'll break the internet. But nahin, a couple of things emerged from there that I was thinking while you were making this argument. One is that कि इसका एक implication ये भी हो सकता है कि इस चक्कर में जो लोग बोलते हैं कि मैं तेरे शादी करूंगा, खासकर आदमी कनाडा ले जाऊंगा, वो नहीं बोलेंगे, डरेंगे अब क्योंकि उनको रेप लग जाएगा. So that you're saying, the whole false promise to marry section is going to go down. कोई करेगा ही नहीं इस डर में कि उसके अंदर rape भी attached है.
So, it's a valid point, Vinamra. The only problem with that is that in this country, in criminal cases, you don't need proof to make allegations. So when you say that a man will be afraid of saying these things, it is most of the cases. I have represented hundreds of clients, right? And I've spoken with, I'd say 1,000+ men who've been accused of these offenses. They've shown me concrete proof in their own individual cases that nothing like this was said. In fact, the discussion was completely different. And yet, the girl just needs to go and say to the cops, write a complaint that a false promise to marry was made. She doesn't need to document anything. She doesn't need any sort of proof. She just goes and says this. So how difficult do you think it is for a woman to say that he promised me, and that too when these things have transpired behind four walls? That a woman goes and says that he made a false promise to marry, and then the man...
दीवारों के वाकई में कान होते. Things would have been easier. Look, everyone on the internet will, of course, there is a very strong rising sentiment of men's right activists तो बहुत उभर के आ गए हैं, खासकर false rape के अंदर, इंडिया में particularly.
Right.
If you actually, when I was doing research for this podcast, after doing all my research, I was asking ChatGPT, tell me what are the most controversial laws, and I was trying different combinations to figure out what are the most controversial laws. Always number 1 and 2 पे marital rape, ठीक है, क्या कहते हैं, false promise वाला ये भी आ रहा था, ठीक है. But one thing that I find that despite all of this, that this movement, it seems to me that, and I'm saying this very carefully, very thoroughly after having thought about it as well, it seems to me that women also then get dealt a bad hand. क्योंकि अब क्या होता है कि जैसे कि मी टू मूवमेंट आई थी, फिर मी टू मूवमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा उसकी क्रेडिबिलिटीज पे सवाल आने शुरू हो गए. इट एक्सपोज द फर्स्ट फ्यू मैन हु फोर्सफुली स्लेप्ट विद वुमेन, बट उसके बाद से ना इट सॉर्ट ऑफ गॉट इट्स होल्स पंक्चर्ड इन इट. And then this movement emerged कि men have been falsely accused after many men got acquitted of having never done anything. Now, with this movement of men's right activists rising and trying to fight against false rape cases, does this anyway socially impact women कि अब वो rape case नहीं लगा सकती या फिर उनके लिए अब कोई recourse नहीं है? Or, big question, do you think that rape laws are unjustly biased against men?
I would in fact agree with you that in the pursuit of men's rights activism, a lot of women's rights have been diluted to a significant extent. But
On the ground, आप मानते हो इस बात को?
I agree. But I also believe that there are certain nuances to this, and I'd like to explain. I say that you need these laws. A lot of these laws you need. It's very easy for men's rights activists, and that's why I don't really identify as one of them. It's very easy for men's rights activists. It's just like left versus right. Whatever my person says is the gospel truth, and nothing else can come in. The answer lies always in the middle. And here I also believe is the same thing as well. These laws are necessary, but the way these laws are dealt with, it's always a very knee-jerk reaction, right? So Nirbhaya happened, let's pass these laws. Then a couple of men committed suicide facing these false allegations. All of these women are like this. So it's always like a knee-jerk reaction, and I always, from the bird's eye perspective, I always see this happening like the pendulum swing. You've got one event, and then everybody goes crazy and goes on the opposite spectrum. And then another event happens, and then they'll again swing to the opposite side. What we as a society need to understand is that but the problem with understanding nuances and finding a middle route is it's not so exciting.
Yeah, it's not shareable on Twitter for sure.
Sure. And that is why you will find feminists completely silent when a woman abuses the law, and very clearly so. And then you will see men's rights activists completely silent on when a woman is, say, perhaps burnt to death, or she commits suicide, or something else of that nature
because she was raped and she couldn't talk about it.
Whatever, right? If she's a victim in whatever way, right? Maybe as a bride, maybe as a rape victim, maybe, a lot of things happen, right? And so I always say it's about finding the middle route. It's never about this is right or this is right. So in this context as well, I have seen a lot of women who, I don't know, I've never, till now, I've not had women who've been genuinely raped, without, in the proper sense, right? In the way that, say, consent was not there at all, or there was, forcible sexual intercourse. I have not had interactions with those victims till now, but I've had a lot of interactions, and I've represented a lot of women who were subjected to molestation and sexual harassment of various ways, shapes, and forms. And this exact dilemma comes in a lot of these occasions. We are trying to register a case. We are trying to get justice, right? Maybe at the workplace, maybe, in the colony. I remember a colleague of mine, an advocate herself, walking in the park, a man comes and attempts to rape her, tears away at her clothes in a dark park, right? In a dark area of a park. And it took her so much effort to register an attempt to rape case against this man, right? And that too, when this was a poor laborer, this was not even some well-connected, influential man who was throwing money at anything. It was just so much of a task for her. And so, there are hundreds of other examples that I have. Women as victims are facing problems too. Now, the unfortunate thing is that false accusers are enjoying the process. The actual victims and the falsely accused are both suffering. Right? Now, what is the solution? We can always lament and, cry all day. I, as a practitioner, say that there are some very simple solutions which can be incorporated. Okay. You should, A, when the police are given the power to arrest, that's fine. But B, there has to be a certain level of accountability with the police, that if it is found that they were indulging not just in corruption. For corruption, yes, there is the Prevention of Corruption Act. Paisa liya gaya hai, so they will kind of take action against you. And if it is proved. The problem is if the police do not investigate properly. That becomes a huge problem. And there is no accountability for the police not investigating properly. Every single day, the police manufacture evidence, manufacture testimonies, hide evidence produced by the falsely accused person in whatsoever case, be it, rape, dowry, murder, anything. The police are manufacturing evidence, manufacturing statements. They are concealing evidence produced sometimes by the victim, sometimes by the accused person, and they are getting away with it.
Even in the absence of bribes, just to finish cases early and be done with it?
Absolutely. A lot of times. In fact, I'll tell you a statement that is commonly tendered to the accused person by the police officer. The accused person says, I am accused of this ABC offense. I am showing you concrete, unimpeachable proof that I am innocent. Kindly consider this. You know what the police officer says? I would say 99.99, and I say this figure with a lot of introspection in mind, 99.99% of the times, Vinamra, the police will tell the accused person, I am not going to look at or include your version of events, your evidence in the charge sheet. And on top of that, we talk about the overhauling of the criminal, this thing. We had a great opportunity with the BNSS. We could have included it. Unfortunately, no changes to that effect. The material produced or, which the accused person has in his possession, which he can use to show his innocence, are almost never considered by the police. And they are also supported by observations of the judiciary. The judges, the high courts, the Supreme Court have on many occasions very blatantly said that at the time of investigation, the police are free to do investigation as they deem fit. The accused person cannot dictate, or even the victim for that matter, cannot dictate how they conduct their investigation. I say that is fine. Okay, you say that let the police do their job the way they want to. To top off it all, when the charge sheet is filed, which is obviously, at the discretion of the police officer, whatever is there in the charge sheet is whatever the police says that I want it to be there. On top of that, when charges have to be framed against an accused person, right? The accused person comes to the court at that time and says, please look at my material. Look at my evidence, which shows my innocence, which I showed to the police, but the police said, I am not going to add, which the judges say that you don't need to, it's up to the police if they want to add or not add, right? The material in the charge sheet. Now, on top of that, when the accused person comes to court and says, look at my material at the time of framing of charges, when the person says, okay, I say to you that you are accused of these offenses, do you plead guilty or not, right? So that is the period, that is what is called framing of charges, right? At that person, the accused hopes that the court will look at my evidence, which is unimpeachable, concrete evidence, perhaps call detail records, maybe WhatsApp chats, maybe call recordings, things which the investigating officer should have considered, but they didn't, right? Because of the law. Now, here also the accused person, and that is why I say it's very lopsided against the accused person. I wouldn't say against men, against an accused person. But there is another nuance which I'll get into in a minute. Here also, the law of the land says, the Supreme Court has said on many occasions, at the time of framing of charges, we will only consider the charge sheet and nothing beyond that. So you understand what happens. FIR is registered by the accuser. After that, the police are investigating the matter. They compile the charge sheet as they deem fit. The accused person cannot insist that the police investigate into whatever the accused person has with him. After that, the charge sheet is filed, and at the time of framing of charges also, the accused person again has no right to show his evidence. So the first, now practically speaking, say for example, if today a fictitious friend Ajay faces a false rape case by a woman he has never met before in his life, how about that? They've never met. Let's say he has concrete proof that at the time of the supposed date of incident, he was in a completely different city, perhaps 3,000 kilometers away in this country. And he has flight tickets, boarding passes to show that I was in a different city on the day of the allegation.
An alibi, yeah.
Sure, alibi, right? The lady registers FIR. The police are more than happy to register an FIR against the person, because if they don't register the FIR, how do they make money? So the police register the FIR, and then the man comes and says, bhai, look, first of all, they can always arrest. So he has to either bribe them or get anticipatory bail from the court. He gets that. Then he shows his tickets. For God's sake, look at this. Look at CCTV. Maybe in that Bollywood style, this is my face in that cricket match on the day of the alleged incident. The police will say, that's all fine, we'll look at it. Then they file the charge sheet in the court. None of what he has given to the police ever shows up in the charge sheet. Now comes the time for framing of charges. The court says we cannot look at anything beyond the charge sheet. The matter goes to trial. The complainant drags their feet for several months, several years. Several years. So if today in July 2024, an FIR is registered against a man in this kind of a scenario, unless he's very lucky and he has very good lawyers who are able to kind of pull at certain things and make things happen, majority of these men will get the first opportunity to show their flight tickets, their videos and everything somewhere about, it depends from state to state, but at the very minimum about 3 or 4 years. And at that point of time also the matter will still go on and you can expect an acquittal somewhere in about 5 to 7 years after the FIR has been registered, even if you have concrete proof.
ट्रायल के अंदर नहीं लेके जा सकते अपने एविडेंस को.
Agree, that is the only time you can take it.
But that's so long,
yes,
far out.
Precisely. Now add to that, they say, okay, that, you show your, and this is what the judges say. Why don't you show your proof at the time of trial? What's your problem? Why do you want us to consider it right now? The problem, Judge Sahab, is that you insist on me appearing before this court on every single date. You say that the accused person must appear. So there I'm suffering. The stigma, the fact that I have to leave my work, the stress, all of that.
Yeah.
On top of that, imagine this. If I want to go abroad,
Can't.
if my passport, no, I can, unless the court restrains me. That happens sometimes as well. But even as a general procedure, every single person who is accused of an offense, when you apply for a fresh passport or for a renewal of your passport, the regional passport office says you must also get an NOC from the court. Unless the court has put a travel restriction, that is different. But if there is no travel restriction, why the hell do you need the accused person to get an NOC from the trial court? If the trial court wanted that the person should not travel abroad for whatever reasons, right? Perhaps he may escape, or perhaps, whatever, right? Usually that he'll escape the justice system. You put a condition right there and then. But no, you apply, RPO says go to the magistrate. Now here's the beauty. Magistrate says, okay, allowed. And I don't know why. They don't give any reasoning. Allowed for 1 year, allowed for 2 years. So you can imagine a passport is supposed to be renewed for 10 years. You're supposed to get one for 10 years, but you're getting it for 1 year. You're getting it for 2 years. The whole process itself takes about 4 to 5 months. It's a nightmare after nightmare. And on top, icing on the cake will always be the legal fees involved, right? And on the top of that, at the very top, there have been cases, I have dealt with them personally. The accused person shows his proof to the police, completely disregarded, shows his proof to the lawyer who says, yes, obviously, we are there for you. And at the right time, we will show this proof to the court and we'll get justice for you. And you know what happens? The lawyer, by that time, the time comes, forgets about it, forgets about the proof, forgets about the evidences, and doesn't do anything. And then I have had hundreds of people who have consulted me who said, I've had proof from day one. Yet my lawyer also, again, because of passage of time, lawyer forgot. Lawyer did not.
Negligence.
Indeed. The lawyer forgot, and now I've been, convicted, sentenced. And often it's not the person themselves. It's their relative who's sitting and saying, my husband, my brother, my son, my jija is rotting in jail right now. 3 saal, 5 saal, 7 saal ki saza, because the lawyer did not. And again, the layman does not have any idea. So they are grappling, they are going to court, they're paying the fees, they're asking, Vakil sahab, kya hoga? The lawyer is saying, aap tension mat lo, acquittal guaranteed, several years, and then, sorry ji, conviction ho gaya.
I have many follow-ups from this. One I will pursue from here is, मैंने अक्सर जब भी लॉयर से मिला हूँ, मैंने अक्सर नोटिस करा है that it seems to me that distraction and multitasking is the norm of a lawyer, right? You're smiling because it is probably partially true.
I myself am guilty of it, I must confess.
Right. Professional negligence से, because of handling this many cases and running around 2 different courts, अलग-अलग तारीख होती हैं, दिन में 3, 4, 5, 6 तारीख भुगत रहे हो. There is genuine context switching as you go from, say, a rape case to a divorce case to a criminal something else case, right? There is all of that happening. You're under fight or flight, right? Often like on an empty stomach, whatever. आपके client भी phone कर रहे हैं, दबाव डाल रहे हैं. It's a very, I will say for sure from even the outside, it's a very high, it's already worse that you are an accused or having to go to courts, right? किसी भी तरीके के लिए. It's even worse for a lawyer because it's a very high pressure job from what I see. But how much has, in your opinion, if you can give examples, किसी लॉयर की लापरवाही की वजह से केस बर्बाद हो गया, किसी की जान खामा परेशान में आ गई, कोई लोग जेल चले गए क्योंकि लॉयर दिमाग नहीं लगा रहा था अपना.
1 in 5.
Yeah?
Guaranteed, minimum guaranteed 1 in 5 situations. But first and foremost, thank you for the sympathy. For,
No, I'm
for
genuinely saying
placing
that,
yourself in our shoes. It is genuinely a big problem. And I have a couple of thoughts on this. One is, people talk a lot about work-life balance also for lawyers. It doesn't exist. And I feel like, how do you afford the luxury to not be working all the time? To not be working all the time when you know that so many big things are at stake. The person's liberty is at stake, their entire net worth, their life savings, their ancestral properties are at stake. How do you not commit to working every minute of every day if you're not in the courtroom arguing, if you're not on the file preparing, if maybe you are on the computer researching, maybe you are going through the notes one more time, maybe you are consulting your client one last time before you head into the courtroom. If you're not doing all of this and you're trying to have work-life balance, you're doing a huge disservice, because as long as you're in the game of advocacy, perhaps doctors are in the profession of medicine or surgery, till the time you are there. And that's why if someone says, I want to pack it up and I want to, this is something that I never used to think about earlier days. But nowadays I do. And I say that till the time you are here, give it your best, give it your all, right? My team members and I are working till well late into the night, 11, 12 at night. And then we get up early in the morning at 6 or 7. And then we're rushing to the court. And that's all we do day in, day out, every single day. Saturdays are Sundays. Saturdays our district courts are open, but Saturdays and Sundays otherwise are also for planning for the next week's matters and the next month's matters. Summer vacations are there for 30 days for lawyers and for judges. But then we are looking at longer term strategies. We are looking at a bunch of other things. So we are constantly at it. And to what extent do you do this without getting burnt out? That's one aspect, which honestly, I don't really have the answer to it. Now, on the question of all of this leading to perhaps burnout, perhaps callousness, perhaps indifference. These are all things which do come up. I must confess, I must agree. It's happened with me as well. And I have to, from time to time, wake up, slap myself and come to understand the depth of the responsibility that is placed on my shoulders. As a professional, someone who's been given the duty and this responsibility of being an advocate, someone who's been given the privilege of representing other people before a competent authority, right? Be it the police or be it the judge. So I have to take stock of the matter myself. But on a lot of occasions, I say I make mistakes. So does every single advocate, lawyer on the planet. And I think to that extent, our mistakes, even the Bar Council says that, the Supreme Court says that the lawyer's mistake, you cannot call it professional negligence. Perhaps giving, legal advice which was not completely up to the mark is also not professional negligence. However, there is a certain standard which has to be maintained. And if you're going below that standard, then it is definitely professional negligence.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's like saying, I am 150 kilograms and I am wondering, when am I going to get 6 packs? There are such bigger troubles right now which we face as a system, that looking at, the most up to the mark legal service was not given is a thing that we can consider for a far later time.
But it's a service, right? There are no, जैसे मैं ये इसलिए पूछ रहा हूँ आपसे, क्या ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि कोई किसी की जिंदगी को इतना नष्ट कर दिया उसके एक irresponsible lawyer ने, that they in fact sue the lawyer back or file a case against the lawyer for professional negligence? Is that a construct at all?
Yes, absolutely. That happens. So people have tried to file consumer cases against lawyers, that me as a consumer of this thing, but the Supreme Court has on many occasions, including very recently, said that advocacy is not a consumer service. It is a professional service. And so lawyers do not come under the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act. That is one. However, there is one remedy which is available to people, which is filing a complaint with the State Bar Council. of professional negligence, right? And sometimes the bar councils are a little lax, sometimes they are very strict. A lot of lawyers thousands of lawyers over the years have lost their license to practice, have had their license suspended. It is still not up to the mark, to be honest. There have been a lot of cases I have seen where people have filed, and again, I say good service was not given. Forget about that. My life was ruined because of a bad lawyer. Forget about that. How about the lawyer conspiring with the opponent to grab your property, to have you sent in jail, to have you cough up money to pay to the opponent, and then the lawyers are involved. To represent to their client that we have won. They forge and fabricate court decrees showing that the client has won.
You know, मैंने district court में first time district court is I remember going to a tehsil to get some gazetted officer sign as a kid. I still remember someone talking about कि मैंने तो उसका lawyer भी पटा लिया है.
Correct.
ठीक है, क्योंकि अगर कोई एक लेमैन है वो सोचेगा वाओ थोड़े से पैसे दिए लॉयर कर लिया, आई एम सेट, अब हम जीतेंगे इसको. लाइक दे आर पम्प्ड. दे डोंट नो दैट फॉर द लाइफर्स हु आर यूज्ड टू कोर्ट्स एंड व्हाट नॉट, you can even make a lawyer complicit, especially in the lower courts. So that is happening rampantly, right?
Agreed. Lawyers are bought. And, again, I say let's go another level deeper. One is bad legal advice. Another is the lawyer was purchased. Another thing is, a lot of times, this happens so many times, clients come to me and say that, my lawyer was bought off by the opposite party. I tell them, it is very possible that he was not purchased. He was just severely incompetent, because of which your case tanked. This is also a very, very prevalent reality in this country. So, which is a bigger evil? Being bribed by the opponent or being severely incompetent? I leave it to you to decide.
I think I would probably go with incompetence, because ये तो और भी बुरी बात है ना कि पहले आपने वो गाड़ी पर स्टिकर लगाया, आपने वो कपड़े पहने, आपने इतनी मेहनत करी, आपने वकालत करा, वकालत में आए, उसके बाद भी जाके आप एक निकम्मे हो, उसका तो कोई इलाज ही नहीं है.
Now again, to play devil's advocate, Vinamre, I have seen both ends of the spectrum. I have, stood in the shoes of the righteous lawyer, who comes down and says, look at these people doing these things, you're maligning the image of the profession. But then I, stand on the shoes of the average lawyer, right? The regular Joe. Senior never paid anything. Government
He's trying to make his
help
ends
you
meet.
out. Agreed. The person starving to death. You and me both come from privileged backgrounds, right? For this average Joe who perhaps went to a government school, went to, कहने को law school, classes never happened. They were handed a degree after going to the so-called college, just hanging around the canteen area. After 3 years, they're given that degree. They were never given an education. They maybe tried. They did not have the money to afford books, right? They tried to get internships with lawyers, with lawyers who anyways don't know anything, right? And even those lawyers drive them away. So they don't have an iota of idea about how the law practically works. Or even in the academic books, they don't have access to books. And then their parents, and this is not a fictitious account. This is, in fact, almost, I would say, 60-70% of advocates in this country right now, right?
Bhukmari mein wo.
Exactly. So in that scenario, and I'll give you an example of this. I used to wonder, bhai, I'm charging so much money when clients tell me that, I went to this district court in my local area, and every single advocate said, I'll fight your whole case for 10,000 rupees. And I'm like, bhai, this is a steal, matlab, the persons I would charge God knows how much more. How is this guy agreeing to 10,000? Isme iska ghar kaise chal raha hai? What's happening here? And I used to feel bad about charging a lot more money. And then over the years, I realized that it's so horrible, Vinamre. What happens is, this lawyer knows that if I charge 11,000, the guy next to me is going to be like, main to 10,000 mein karunga. So everyone is ready to do the whole case in 10,000. But they take the 10,000, they will work for about something on which they had to work for about 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. They'll work on it for about 1 week or 2 or 4. And then they will suddenly realize It's not worth the 10,000 that I was paid. But they don't refund the money. They will just quietly block the client and stop taking the calls and disappear.
Block the client.
Block the client as well. And now the client has to again, after a couple of weeks, go and find another lawyer who will again say 10,000 rupees whole case.
पर वो तो उसकी bench पे जा सकते हैं जहाँ बैठता था वो.
And the person, half the times these people are not there on the bench. And even if the person comes to the bench, what's going to happen? Imagine you as a layman going to the court complex and walking up to the bench of the lawyer and saying that you defrauded me. What do you think is going to happen? Put yourself in that person's shoes.
See, after you told me the 1 in 5 incident and the fact that the Supreme Court exempts lawyers from the consumer code, consumer protection, क्या होगा? हंसेंगे आप पे कि नहीं हो गया सर, नहीं हुआ, क्या कर सकते हैं?
And if the person shouts or screams, you also need to take into account the ego of the lawyer. And whose territory are you going into and accusing whom?
Yeah. I see.
That's precisely what happens. And so it's a very bad state of affairs. The lawyer cannot charge a decent sum of money, a commensurate, reasonable sum of money, because he knows that he will be undercut by all of his other fellow professionals who are sitting on the bench adjacent to his, right? He takes a little bit of money and then he's like, bhai, what do I do in this? I have to find other bakras as well. So in the middle of all of this, and again, clients, I hear horrible stories from lawyer sides as well, right? I fought the whole case. I got the client bail. Now he refuses to pay any money. I fought the whole case on, say, a pro rata basis, which is also not allowed by the laws. The Advocates Act, they do not allow for you to kind of take a cut of the winnings. It's called champerty. Okay. And yet the person does the work in the hopes for a future payment, because again, they're desperate. They do good work and then the client runs away. So what are you supposed to do? And then comes in this whole, and now I understand, a huge chunk of advocates in the country, especially outside of the big cities, the whole practice is land disputes or big criminal cases where they kind of, make a fool out of the person. We need this, we need that, set the police, set the judge, and, for the bail, and then, the family cuffs up the money. Or it's a land dispute, which again, the lawyer will step in, they will, move things around. Lawyers will coordinate with each other. On opposing sides, they'll coordinate with each other. And then usually they'll end up taking qabza over the entire property themselves. So this is this is very sadly the reality of the business model of advocates in this country. It is bad, but then again, we can point fingers and accuse them. But as I mentioned earlier, what are they going through? What are these advocates going through? So
they have, like आप हो तो न्याय, आप न्याय के दरवाजों पे खड़े तो हो, लेकिन आपकी खुद की जिंदगी में न्याय हो नहीं रहा है ज़्यादा. So you have no other recourse but to beg, borrow and steal. It ultimately comes to that also because the country is oversupplied with lawyers. है ना, कि it's a degree that is very coveted. एक सवाल ये आता है, we both have watched the popular show मामला लीगल है, right? And इससे पहले whenever Bollywood has portrayed lawyers on the screen, it's strictly either outside the courtroom or inside the courtroom, right? Or the legal chamber जहाँ पे फाइलें पड़ी होती हैं. Mamla Legal has a very different take. It takes you to all the nooks and crannies of a lawyer's life. It takes you to the boring panchayat-like style of a tehsil or जो बाहर वाले chambers होते हैं, chamber allotment. It goes really deep.
Yeah.
Off camera, you were saying you really liked how accurate it was.
Yeah.
एक चीज जो उभर के आती है, for people I'm spoiling the show, कि कौन जो भी उसका पटपड़गंज होता है शायद उनके कोर्ट का नाम पटपड़गंज, हाँ, उसका बार काउंसिल का प्रधान कौन बनेगा. सो द कॉन्टेस्ट इज बिटवीन यशपाल शर्मा एंड क्या नाम है इसका, रवि किशन, राइट? दोज आर द टू एक्टर्स. We see all kinds of tactics like we see in DU elections, in the local general elections also. पर एक जो मेरे लिए बड़ा सरप्राइजिंग लगता है, that they didn't fire guns, right? मैंने इतनी वीडियोस देखी हैं of lawyers, particularly in the elections, firing guns or resorting to violence. Why is the lawyer community more prone to open violence when they're supposed to be the harbingers of justice?
Because they can't get away with it. It's as simple as that. Almost any sort of human behavior, especially violence, is something that the more you're allowed to get away with it, the more, the chances that you'll do it, right? Funnily enough, I was, while I was abroad a couple of, some time ago, I was talking to some people from Pakistan,
Hmm.
and they were lamenting how horribly open the whole gun culture among lawyers is. I don't know if you've seen
AK-47s?
Yes, indeed. AK-47 firings in the air in celebration for winning a bar election. So it's pretty bad in other places. I mean, we can maybe find a little solace in that.
Huh.
India, yes, a lot of lawyers do carry guns because they'll carry guns. Again, some of them say that we do it out of the necessity of self-preservation, because we've got situations where the opponent is maybe some sort of a gunda, we're trying to prosecute, or the opponent is some sort of gunda party. Now I am driving in the middle of the small town or village. What happens then, right? And it's also, a big component of it is also the other side has it. If I don't, I'm screwed. So, again, nuclear deterrence. What is it? It is very similar over here as well. Last I remember, there was a shooting event at Tisdari courts in Delhi a couple of months ago. Again, both sides fired. Thankfully, they were all horribly, I don't think anybody got injured, but shots were fired, right? It's been, I think, 2 years now? 2 years, 2.5 years. This thing escalated quite a bit between Delhi police and between the lawyers of Tisdari. So much, and for what? For God's sake, there was a parking dispute. The lawyer said, I want to park the car here. The police officer on guard duty at that time said, you can't park over here. Now, I don't know who's at fault, who escalated what, and I will side with the legal community on this. Let me say that. Because as much as we can point fingers at lawyers and say, this is abuse of privilege, perhaps. What is happening on the other side, right? So a lot of people also complain about, lawyers go on strikes. What is this? But the question is, again, we as a community of lawyers, who is there for our rights? Who is going to stand up for our rights? Nobody does. In fact, that's why I'll say again, I loved Mamla Legal Hai. The way they portrayed bar politics, right? And bar leaders standing up for lawyers is something which is a very accurate portrayal. Do you think that we are lawyers, we are helping other people get justice? The irony is, I am very effective as an advocate when I'm helping somebody else. When I am stuck in any sort of hot soup myself, I am scrambling about, I am a mess, I can't think clearly, right? I have to engage another lawyer, another advocate to help me out of my hot soup, funnily enough. Because I can't think straight, and that's another reason why they say you should never be your own client. You should never represent yourself in your own case, right? Now, advocates, yes, there is propensity for violence. There are guns and everything. But then again, at the end of the day, and I'll give you an example. This Tisdari incident that I was talking about escalated quite a bit. So what happened was, the police officer beat up the lawyer. Then a bunch of lawyers ganged up and beat up this police officer. Then about 20-30 police officers came and beat up those 10-15 lawyers. And then about 100 lawyers came in and beat up these 20-30 police officers. And then half the police force in Delhi showed up. Hundreds upon hundreds of police officers. And without any discrimination were using lathis. Now, these are people who are trained in physical force. And all of them have guns. Now they are indiscriminately beating up lawyers left, right, center. The entire Tisdari courts became a battleground. At the end of it all, the lawyers have a certain responsibility, but so do the police. The police at that moment decided that we are the ones with the actual guns and the lathis. We are going to be the ones to wreak havoc. And so they did. Now at the end of it all, and lawyers were shot. There were lawyers who were shot in the middle of all of this. And we
with
were
rubber bullets or like actual bullets?
No, actual bullets. Actual bullets. Nobody died, but lawyers were shot. They ended up in the hospital. The shirts bleeding, the wounds, bullet wounds, everything we could see. In that moment, we as lawyers, we expect that the judges are going to side with us. Sadly, no. The Delhi High Court ordered an inquiry, ordered no arrests. Not a single police officer was arrested nor suspended. Police officers ganged up. They went to the legislature and they pulled their own strings. And unfortunately, I must say, the judiciary did not side with the lawyers. Right? So we as the legal community, we have to stand up for ourselves. If we don't strike, we have nothing else left. The problem is, who do we go to? The judges. And judges are always looking out to maintain their camaraderie with the lawyers also, but with the police as well.
Equality. That's
Not
law.
equality. I would say a certain sense of equilibrium. Not equality, but
वो
equilibrium.
literally तराजू की तरह खेल रहे होते हैं.
Correct. भाई मेरे को इसके साथ भी रिश्ता बना के रखना है, मेरे को इसके साथ भी बना के रखना है.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this, again at the end of the day, the cops are the ones with the guns. Right? We don't all have guns, right? And there is a youth, cops can legally carry guns, right? We as advocates, if anybody, even a lawyer, is caught with a gun on a bad day, we will be charged with Section 25 of the Arms Act. There's a very severe offense. Trial will take place. Our license can be suspended in that time. So, there are repercussions that we can face. So all I say is that it's a nuanced point. You can't just say that lawyers have guns and why this violence. This is also something that we have to kind of...
Oh shit, अब मैं police versus lawyer की reel कैसे काटूंगा? But no, there's many more things I want to discuss, and particularly around... See, you have taken a pivot since the last time we spoke. At some point, and I have many questions today. At some point, मुझे याद है you were doing all kinds of criminal cases, right? As time went on and your infamy reached many places across Delhi and the rest of India and possibly the world, you decided to focus on extremely rich clients. That is why you entered the divorce field. तो देखो ऐसा है कि गांव देहात में तो डिवोर्स नहीं होता, सेपरेशन हो जाता है अक्सर. ठीक है, है ना? लेकिन हाई सोसाइटी के अंदर, बड़े बड़े शहरों में, टियर 1 सिटीज में बहुत आम बात है डिवोर्स होना. अर्ली डिवोर्स होना भी आम बात है.
राइट.
Alimonies and highly public divorce cases often open up many threads of conversation in the general populace. The most famous being the Hardik Pandya divorce case. His winning the World Cup, that prize winning, that legendary pari that he played with his bowling, and seeing his estranged wife missing in action. I went to her Instagram and I saw people are saying W for Hardik because she's not doing any celebrations, right? And he also sort of broke down, very बड़ा visceral, tangibly दिख रहा था कि आदमी कितनी चीज के through गया है. Now, in my little understanding of how public divorces play out, I found that it's almost like the men are dealt an extremely bad hand if they are extremely rich and extremely popular, because the privilege and the curse of being their partner in life through marriage also allows the woman to get 50% of everything. तो इंडिया के डिवोर्स लॉज फिलहाल एलिमनी को लेके कहाँ स्टैंड करते हैं? अगर वो लॉज हैं तो क्या हैं?
Couple of thoughts on this. To start with, nowadays you'll see even in the small towns and villages, it's not just separation. Nowadays there's a whole culture of let's go ahead with it. File cases, let's get divorced, find another match. The stigma of divorce or being a divorcee is shedding to a certain extent. I have a lot of people consulting me from small cities. And so I agree that this is not necessarily divorce, but matrimonial disputes do crop up, right? A lot of wives are filing, sometimes true, sometimes falsely, dowry harassment cases, right? Criminal breach of trust, which is that, they kept my jewelry.
Does cheating come up a lot?
Cheating, you mean adultery. Adultery is something that comes up, but, smart lawyers explain to their clients that adultery is not a great ground for, is not a great legal strategy as an accusation. So a woman saying that my husband committed adultery does not have that much of an impact than a woman, compared to a woman saying that my husband tortured me for dowry. If I make sense. So,
So एक मिनट, सॉरी, इसका मतलब ये है कि आप लॉयर्स भी खुद बोलते हैं, फोर्स करते हैं क्लाइंट्स को कि आप इस पे ये वाला केस लगा दो और ज़्यादा बुरा फंस जाएगा ये.
When so much is at stake, it is a very, human tendency. Whatever you can get away with, try to make the most of it.
But lawyers are complicit in this then forcing their client to a corner.
Very often. And I've talked about it on numerous occasions.
I know you have a video about this. Yeah.
So just to summarize that whole aspect, what happens is, say for example, a lady who's been a victim of maybe not torture, but perhaps indifference by the husband, right? Let's just say that. The lady is told by her relatives and friends, let's explore what are your legal options, right? And then the lawyer says, we'll file one case here, one case there, and you see how your husband comes to his knees. and then does whatever you want, right? So the girl says, okay, fantastic. And then the lawyer prepares the draft of not that, oh, he said he insulted me in this way in front of his parents or family, or he asked me to do the dishes, or that he, he shouted at me, on so and so occasion. It's not that. It is on the first day of marriage, he, beat me. My mother-in-law came and grabbed my hair and said, you did not bring any dowry, so we are going to XYZ. They put, oil on my body. They threw oil on my body and was trying to set me on fire. And my father-in-law came and attempted to rape me. My, brother-in-law came and groped me. And the lady herself will look at this draft of these allegations and say, what the hell is this? I did not say any of these things to you to draft for my complaint. And then the lawyer explains, madam, if you want something to happen, some action to take place, or at least to hold this as a threat over the husband, then these allegations must be there. If you say just an insult was there, or neglect was there, that's no offense. That's no grounds for getting any relief.
Quick interjection. इसका मतलब क्या है कि offense पे ही divorce मिलता है भाई? जैसे हम मैं Wikipedia पे जाता हूँ.
No, so I understand your question.
Yeah.
The clarification I'll give is, there are several components. One is, how do you get divorce, right? And I agree that cruelty can be neglect as well, right? Can be insults as well. That can be enough. However, to get a divorce, we are talking about multiple things. One is getting divorce. The lady will file a divorce case, but interestingly, and this is something that on YouTube they'll quote on a lot of occasions. I don't know if it's true or not, but they say that statistically across the world, women are the ones who initiate divorce far more than men. That's not the case in India. At least when you talk about on paper what's happening. 99% of the times, the lady does not initiate divorce. Only 1% of the cases. Okay? 1 out of 100, the lady will file divorce. What she does instead, because a lot of husbands say, oh, what if my wife files divorce? I tell them, your wife will, in all likelihood, 99 out of 100 will not file divorce. She will file all the other things which will ultimately lead to the divorce, but not the divorce case. So what she will file, because it does not benefit her to file any divorce case. What benefits the wife is filing a FIR under sections 498A, 406, at least under the old law, dowry harassment, that, dowry harassment, and then criminal breach of trust, that they took my jewelry and now they're not returning it. And then all these other sections. So she'll register an FIR. Now those need to be an offense. Another component is domestic violence, where she's seeking compensation, residence orders, and interim maintenance against the husband and the other family members. Now again, she can say that yes, there was neglect and there was insults, but the judges are also very, apprehensive in moving forward against a man or his family members on mere accusations of insults and neglect.
Question: Does judges' apprehension towards giving or granting divorces also come from our cultural values? क्योंकि अमेरिका में क्या होता है, मैं जो पहले कह रहा था कि किसी सेलिब्रिटी के आप अगर विकीपीडिया पे जाओ, पर्सनल लाइफ वाले सेक्शन पे जाओ, तो उसमें कभी कभी लिखा होता है कि एंड देन जेनिफर एनिस्टन एंड ब्रैड पिट सॉट डिवोर्स ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दे हैव इनरिकंसिलिएबल डिफरेंसेस. उनको मिल जाता है आसानी से. तो यहाँ पे कल्चरल डिफरेंसेस की वजह से भी रोकते हैं डिवोर्स.
So that's not the case. In India nowadays, there are a lot of mutual divorces happening. One is mutual divorce, right? Irreconcilable differences. That has not been codified yet properly. But, it cannot be one-sided. A person cannot come to the court and say irreconcilable differences, so please give me divorce. There has to be certain accusations. However, mutual divorce is something which is taking place very often nowadays in the country. So much so that almost all of the cases, although the courts have been given the discretion, but if both parties come together and say we mutually want divorce, nobody comes in the middle nowadays. There are certain conditions. However, very basic stuff like, now, but it is a little painful. So imagine you get married today and tomorrow you realize, just like Britney Spears and that former husband of hers, you realize that this marriage is not working out. So the next day also you can go for annulment, you can go for this thing, you can go for divorce. In India, however, if annulment is a whole another bag in itself. Annulment cannot be mutual. Both parties cannot go to the court and say this was a mistake, let's annul the marriage and make it void. However, divorce can take place mutually, but a minimum of 18 months have to transpire between the date of the marriage, at least among Hindus, right? Hindu Marriage Act. 18 months must transpire from the date of marriage till the date of grant of divorce. So, for example, you get married today, and especially imagine this, Vinamra, arranged marriage, and there is incompatibility for whatever reason, right? The next day, you both realize, "Bhai, this is not going to work." You must wait for at least an 18-month period before you can get a divorce.
और तुम्हें इन लॉज, घर वाले, समाज, मतलब औरतों की चूड़ियाँ, आदमी का ये कि नई नई शादी हुई है, ये सब सहना है बिकॉज यू अनाउंस्ड इट टू द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड एंड नाउ यू आर फक्ड. इज दिस वेयर द सेपरेशन पीरियड हैपेंस वेयर men and women will say we're separated because they're actually waiting on their divorce to kick in?
That happens quite often. Quite often. So there is a minimum mandatory 6-month period of, cooling off also, which has been prescribed under the law. They try to put in safeguards, which I believe are all unnecessary, to be honest. The so-called sanctity to the institution of marriage was meant in a very different way. It has been contorted in such hideous ways now. It is horrible, yeah. Especially when you consider, arranged marriage. Arranged marriage, then you have to wait for, all of this time. Then in the middle, you've got lawyers coaching, especially the women, that if you just take these XYZ steps, there is so much more money to be made. And then, there is also manipulation. Nothing has happened. Yet, we will tell the woman, look at how he has ruined your life. He said this. He didn't do this. His mother said this. Do you not think that you should seek compensation? Do you not think that you should seek justice, retribution? And in the middle of all of this, last week, client comes and says, we both signed for mutual divorce. We went to the local court, filed for mutual divorce. And the lawyer came and said, the lawyer called up and said that there's some documentary difficulty, so you'll have to come to court again. The wife says, no, now I want money. I have hired a lawyer and now I'm going to pursue the case. Why did this happen? In the middle of this conversation, in the middle of this whole process of getting divorced, wife is, being manipulated by some other advocate who says you can get a good deal out of this. And this is what takes place very often. Yeah.
अब मैं इन नोट्स को 5 मिनट के लिए बंद करता हूँ और मैं आपसे सवाल पूछता हूँ इस डिवोर्स के बारे में, राइट? बिकॉज नाउ यू आर अ लेजेंडरी डिवोर्स लॉयर नाउ. 2-3 सवाल है यार, और वो सबसे पहला सवाल तो ये कि आपका खुद का विश्वास कितना ज़्यादा उठा है इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ मैरिज से, क्योंकि इन अ वेरी रियलिस्टिक सिनेरियो most people in this country will see 4 or 5 marriages. They will see their parents' marriage, their grandparents' marriage, their own marriage, their kids' marriage. If they're lucky, their grandparents, मतलब grandkids' marriage, right? आसपास के रिश्तेदारों के अलग मैं काउंट नहीं कर रहा, अपने डायरेक्ट ब्लड के अंदर आप देखते हो, आपका एक्सपीरियंस होता है, चाहे लड़ाई हो, झगड़ा हो, कोई आदमी औरतों को मारते हैं, कोई औरतें आदमियों को टॉर्चर करती हैं, जो भी कुछ होता है. But we don't have a big sample size of marriages the way you do. And you have a very clinical sample size. And you deal with many people who are severely aggrieved, right? उस केस में आपका विश्वास मैरिटल इंस्टीट्यूशन में कितना उठ चुका है, अभी भी बरकरार है? आपने अपनी आंखों के सामने शादियां टूटती बनती हुई देखी हैं? अगर हैं तो कोई एग्जाम्पल्स हैं? So let me rephrase this. 1, your trust in the institution of marriage. 2, the worst cases of divorce that you've had to handle where the man was suicidal or the woman was suicidal or like something worse, and the best cases where the marriage patched up.
Very heavy question, yeah, Vinamra. I am not married, never been married, and to a certain extent, I do feel that it's very difficult for me to get married, understanding what I have seen. Right, I remember in an earlier office that I used to work with. One of the ladies over there, I think of her as an aunt, right? Very close to her. She never got married, and the reason that she gave for never getting married was that around the time that she was completing her law, her friend was tortured so much in her marriage, in her very new marriage. They were all young. Very new marriage. The friend was tortured so much she committed suicide. And this senior of mine, she saw that and she resolved to never get married. Right? It was kind of a decision to never get married. And she's had a very good life, as a single lady. She's a good practice, travels the world, very happy. I would call her one of the more content women that I've met in my life. My own thoughts. One aspect is, to what extent is the institution of marriage good for you as an individual? My personal take on this is, marriage was always a bad deal for women, at least in India. the society, the structure, the
नहीं,
duties.
क्यों? Why is that? If the women came from a slightly lower socioeconomic class, they were guaranteed a stable income, a big house, food, the ability to stay inside and nurture their kids, a cushioned life, especially if they came from, relative poverty compared to the groom.
Things like Dahej, things like Sati, things like domestic abuse. We cannot, we cannot lose sight of these things.
Correct.
They were always a bad deal for women, as a structure. What has happened in the past few decades is that as bad of a deal as it was for women, now the laws have made it a bad deal for men. So society-wise, it's a bad deal for women. Legal-wise, I believe it's a bad deal for men, right? Whichever way you want to look at it. Not that I'm saying that every man is vulnerable. There are a lot of men who, because of the structure of the legal system, if you know what you want to go for, you don't really suffer much, right? A lot of husbands ask me, what can I do to prevent false allegations? I say that there's not much you can do to prevent false allegations on you. There's no proof as such that you can collect. Or, a lot of people say, oh, what if I collect call recordings? Useless. We can go into that later. A lot of people say, what if I put all my money into a trust? Useless. We can go into the details, later. But what I tell them is, it's a two-part answer. I tell them, one, there is not much that you can do to, prevent false allegations. However, what is going to be the actual impact of those false allegations? It's not that you're going to be thrown to the gallows. It's not that you're going to spend several years in jail. It's not that you're going to lose half of your net worth. It's a very common misconception in this country, but that's actually not the case. A lot of bad things do happen and they are very bad, but it's not as bad as a lot of times we construct it in our head. Okay. So in my mind, I simply do not feel that, and especially in India, I feel that for a man, and it depends, right? I would say in my very close friend circle, funnily enough, it's all the professionals and the entrepreneurs who have not gotten married.
Right.
And every government servant has gotten married. Yeah. So, and all of these friends obviously consult me. They talk to me and they ask me, can I do something safeguard? I'm like, bhai, your wife earns more than you. So you don't need to worry.
Yeah, in fact, you should be the one asking for a divorce.
Perhaps, yeah. So, it depends, right? What kind of a situation you are in. For some people, yes, it becomes a far worse deal in comparison to other people.
So, उसकी क्या example हो सकते हैं जो आपने देखे?
I'll give you an example right now. I was reading some comment by, on something about the Ambani wedding, right? Yeah. That, Radhika will kind of come in and take his money and then leave. Yeah. If, obviously, touch wood, we want the couple to be happily married ever after. Right. But assume as a case study, right, that Radhika says, I want your money, to what extent will she be able to get any money, right? This Singhania dispute also, I believe, was there, right?
With Gautam Singhania and his father and his wife.
His wife,
yeah.
And another case study would be, say, Hardik Pandya. Let's take these three people. But in fact, not really, because, let's take these three people because they are actually good three case studies. Let's take first the Ambani family. If Radhika madam at any point of time says, I want a divorce, okay, you can always go for a divorce. And if you want to keep the scandal out of limelight, then, you could give her 1 rupee, you could give her 10,000 crore rupees. It is irrelevant. It is about what both parties agree on. Let's say there is no agreement and cases are filed, right? The lady will file an FIR against the husband for cruelty for the purpose of dowry, right? This is very funny. I think one of the Flipkart founders had his wife accuse him of torturing her for dowry for a 5 crore rupee house or something, or 5 crores for dowry. This is from a man who is worth some couple of thousand crore rupees. That's what I'm saying. The wife alleges, came in the news, the wife alleged that he tortured me for 5 crores dowry. To what extent do you find it to be believable that a man and a man who's worth several thousand crores tortured his wife for 5 crores of dowry.
वो तो अपना पैसा पूसा कमा के सिंगापुर में बेस भी शिफ्ट कर चुके हैं. They don't give a fuck.
So this is something that, this allegation thing came several years ago, and I remember reading and laughing about it. So now here also, if the lady files in the Ambani case, right? If the lady files an FIR against the husband, she's going to say, oh, cruelty for the purpose of dowry, whatever. The law is such that the man is, as per law, not by bribing or anything, is very easily going to be able to, prevent any arrest from taking place. Charge sheet will be filed in the court. They can go for quashing or otherwise, date pe date, chalo chal raha hai. Second is the lady files a domestic violence petition and says, I'm a victim and this and that. And that case goes on. She seeks compensation. Now, if that case is ever decided, maybe she'll get a couple of 100 crores as compensation. Although it's very unusual because courts usually don't award compensation very easily. Most of the times the cases anyways get wrapped up. Why? Because it'll be anywhere between 3 to 10 years for the case to be decided for her to get that amount, right?
बीच में क्या होगा?
बीच में केस चल रहा है, बस parties will exchange pleadings, evidence, testimony will be recorded. Some occasions, yes, in this particular case, one point of dispute may be one house, right? So the residence location where the both parties were residing, which was, let's assume, which was owned by the Ambani family, the lady can come in and say that, oh, I want a residence order, not ownership. Residence order, residence to right to reside in this house. Now,
Co-reside?
Yes, exactly. So she cannot say that everybody else should be thrown out unless it's a very small flat in Bandra, Bombay. That's a different story. But it's a very big house. The court will say, okay, you stay in this one particular portion and the rest of them can occupy the rest. So again, it defeats the point. She does not do a kabza over the entire property. And the third is maintenance, where she says, I have insufficient means to maintain myself. So I want interim maintenance. For the rest, alimony and everything will be decided later. And then the husband files Anant files a divorce case on her, where again, after several years, she may get a few hundred, maybe a few thousand crores as alimony. But then the question for deciding interim maintenance also and permanent alimony also is to what extent the lady is a vagabond, is, starving on the streets, or she is entitled to a life of luxury commensurate to that of the husband. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Radhika merchant herself comes from a family which is worth thousands of crores.
Correct.
And she herself, her personal net worth would be also a minimum of a few thousand crores. So technically, if they ever end up into separation, the Ambani family in totality, even the man Anant over here, would barely face any scratch at all. That's case study number 1, right? Case study number 2 is kaun sa tha?
It's the Singhania case, the Raymond
Singhania case, yes. Now, we don't know about the personal net worth of the wife over here. Assuming that she has zero money to her name, she can secure herself a floor in one of the massive Bombay houses that they have. She cannot say, oh, all of this is mine, right? That's number 1. Number 2, she'll file FIR again. The man is able to kind of secure it. And not, again, bribes or nothing. There's no bribes or nothing. I would say about 90% of the cases nowadays, husbands are not arrested in India. Okay. Especially if they're not idiots. And if they don't have horrible lawyers, they're able to manage things, right? That's what happens everywhere as a matter of due course. Now, the lady will file her domestic violence petition seeking compensation. And again, that case will take several years. And she'll also file interim maintenance. And now in the middle of this, these people are worth, Gautam Singhania is worth 10,000 crores or whatever, 5,000 crores. The wife can ask for maintenance. The courts have, in my experience, the worst possible scenarios people have, been burdened with some sort of interim maintenance would be something like, say, maybe 10 lakhs a month or 15 lakhs a month. That's the maximum I've seen ever. Okay.
Even with extremely rich families.
Even with extremely rich people. 10, 15.
And what's the lowest? 5,000, 6,000 type ka?
2,000, 1,000, 0. Yeah. A lot of gaon mein courts are routinely fixing 2,000 rupees. See, and that's the look of shock on your face, Vinamre, talks about the level of privilege that you come from, which I must confess, I also come from as well. Because for a huge chunk of the Indian population, 2,000-3,000 is enough to be
get
able to
ration,
survive.
Get a small room, kamra lena.
Correct. So 15-20 lakhs. Now, again in this thought, this little thought exercise that we have, even if the wife doesn't have anything, Singhania's, right? how much of maintenance will she be able to get? She'll secure one flat, theek hai. He's got 10 others. She'll be able to secure 15, 20, 30 lakh rupees as maintenance, right? Interim maintenance, which ends up into what? 2 crores, 3 crores, 4 crores rupees a year.
He just has to fire a CMO and replace that with his salary with his wife's.
Sure. Now, that's one aspect. And theek hai, at the end of it all, maybe after several years of litigation, she may be awarded, commensurate 100 crores, 200 crores. But funny thing is, I remember she was asking for half of his net worth. She was asking for something like 1,000 crore rupees. Now, in what sense, if you have to pay 3 crores or 4 crores or 5 crores a year, maybe part with one flat which is worth around 100 crores or 200 crores, in what universe does it make sense for him to pay 5,000 crores to his wife? Or 1,000 crores, whatever it was, like 800 crores, something, whatever, to his wife? Doesn't make sense, right? So he'd rather fight it out. But one other angle for the rich is also the fact that they're famous, and to what extent will the person want to keep this stuff outside of the limelight?
Correct.
So he might be incentivized to pay far more just because of his reputation. Yeah. So yeah, and Hardik Pandya, honestly, see, I don't know to what extent, because it was just, these are just rumors, right? There has been no official statement by any of them.
Yeah, but the rumors are very rife and the evidence is surmounting every day. And I think there is a clip of that you only have, which says कि इसने अपनी मम्मी के नाम पे सब कुछ कर रखा है, which is something that I forget which footballer very recently.
Achraf Hakimi. I made a video about that also.
हाँ, हकीमी और 2-3 और निकले हैं जिन्होंने फिगर आउट करा है कि मेरी माँ तो मेरे को दगा नहीं देगी. तो जिस बीवी या सुपर मॉडल से मैंने शादी करी थी अपने पॉपुलैरिटी के दिनों में, जिसने कहा कि हाँ तू बहुत अच्छा है, at some point when I'm too busy and she's like I'm bored, whatever, or this guy is a scum, I don't want him. उस वक्त पे तो चलो इसके पैसे तो ले ही लेती हूँ. Like that's when like a classic gold digger is also exposed, by the way, right? So at that point, someone like Hardik Pandya or someone like these footballers, what do they do? Because it's like, it's out in the public. Everyone knows कि कुछ ना कुछ scene तो off है. कि like how would they go about it? What's your take on it?
So there are multiple thoughts on this. One is, it's very easy for us to just stamp her and be like a gold digger. There are many other things, right?
I'm speaking as a member of the paparazzi.
Right.
I'm speaking like that because that is the sort of reporting. I confess it's not the wisest take to give, but it's the reporting that I've consumed, which is of course mangled with my head. But
to play devil's advocate, there is also the cheating athlete spouse.
That's true.
So the cheating spouse, the neglectful spouse, and then that's coming from a guy whose 90% of clients are men, right? Are husbands.
Cheat kar rahe hote hain sare.
Not necessarily. No. I'm just saying again, this is part of the narrative.
Yeah.
Now, but yes, a lot of people say, put it in a trust. There's no trust to be done. Okay. Achraf Hakimi, I don't know, because again, news articles will give you something that someone said, they'll run with it for several months. But what's actually going on in the court case, nobody reports after that, right? If you try to Google Achraf Hakimi trust mother wife thing right now, you will find articles from 10 months, 15 months ago, whenever that thing transpired. But nothing new.
Right.
By what happened in the case, what happened in the dispute, we have no idea. No reporting being done. So we're completely blinded. I personally feel, and at least in India, I'm 100% sure about this, even abroad, putting your money in a trust. See, one thing is, if this was old money, if this was inheritance, or maybe money that you earned many, many years ago, and then you kind of donated it or you kind of set up a trust for it, you can still hope to safeguard it. But athletes and say perhaps business executives, people with a high income, not necessarily high net worth, but high income, there is almost no way across the world for them to so-called protect their assets. If I am rendering a service or I am participating as an employee or anything else at an institution, say for example, at a football club where I am raking in whatever, couple of $1 million, euros, pounds a year, there is no way that I say that if I say, oh, put this money into my mother's account, then the court cannot touch it. Usually, at least in India, this is what takes place. I can't 100% comment about multiple jurisdictions across the world. In India, what takes place is, man says, I have no money to give. I have transferred my money, I have transferred my property, I have gifted my property to my mother, to my brother, whoever. Or, a far smarter move would be to say that I had business debts and I paid back all those debts. Now I am penniless. Even then the court says, we are able to see what you are trying to pull off, mister. We are fixing this XYZ amount of interim maintenance. You don't want to pay, you're more than welcome. all we are going to do is issue warrants of attachment, warrants of arrest. And if you cannot, and if you have a property in your name which we can grab onto, we'll grab that. If we cannot, we simply send you to jail till you make the payment. That's simply what happens in this country. Now, again, if someone says your original question, how do you safeguard yourself? There's very little that can be done, especially if you're in the limelight, your figures are well known publicly. Money comes into your bank account, court considers that. Court is not going to say that, oh, because this was money sent to Anuradha ji, or money sent to XYZ Trust, or money sent overseas, that now the person, they'll say, "Theek hai bhai, tu jail ja." It's as simple as that.
If you can do very little, it proves a time-old statement about marriage that it is completely about vulnerability and opening yourself to being stabbed by the other, but you would do it with love. Of course, these romantic notions have no place in the chambers of Amish Agarwal, where you are able...
Cold calculating. That's what we consider ourselves.
उसी पे आते हैं. See, there are so many facets with divorces. I would like to know about the men, खासकर वो जो cheat कर लेते हैं, क्योंकि what I'm going to say now is going to sound a little offensive to some women, right? मैंने अक्सर देखा, गांव देहात में ज़्यादा देखा है कि आदमी एक मिस्ट्रेस भी रख लेते हैं, ठीक है, 2 बीवियाँ 3 बीवियाँ. अभी एक अरमान मलिक बिग बॉस में आ रहे हैं आजकल. he's got 2 wives, Hindu, he's got 2 wives, they both live with him. And somehow ऐसा मेरे को लगता है कि औरतें अक्सर या तो because again stereotype कि आदमी उनको डायमंड्स दिला रहा है या सेट दिला रहा है या घर बच्चे हैं, अब the woman sort of looks away at the cheating कि चलो कर ली तो कर ली. But the men who cheat and then फिर divorce की नौबत आ जाती है, using specific cases, what is that conversation like with your clients? और वो guilty होते हैं कि यार cheat कर लिया यार, अब मेरे को divorce करना पड़ेगा.
So one thing on spouse looking the other way, I'll tell you, I don't think you may have seen husbands who look the other way. Perhaps maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah, rarer.
I very regularly see husbands who look the other way. Very often. I see in my practice 50-50. That the 50-50 of not husband and wife cheating. I'm saying among all the cheaters, men and women, the husbands are also 50% of the people who are looking the other way, and the wives are also 50% of the people who are looking the other way. Wives, often, I will also, to a certain extent, agree to this notion that perhaps they think that it's too much of a hassle to, get divorced or whatever. And just
but there is also clear powerlessness. अगर आप खासकर हाउसवाइफ या होम मेकर और आपको आदत पड़ गई, आप क्या कर सकते हो? कौन, आप कहाँ मायके में कैसे जाओगे? मतलब आप लॉ के डायरेक्शन से बोल रहे हो, मैं आपको मॉरली बोल रहा हूँ. औरतों पे कितना बड़ा एक वो होता है कि कौन जाएगा? बच्चे हैं, घर बार है, सब कुछ है, चलो चीट ही करता है तो ठीक आदमी है. मतलब these are the kind of...
At the end of the day, yes, I mean, I think it was Gangs of Wasipur. She said that, she was pregnant and the guy is gone, and she said, you do it, but like do it like this or something like that.
Yeah, कि basically खाना खा के जाओ, बाहर जाके नाक मत कटवाना और मतलब हाथ धो के आना, मुंह धो के आना,
stuff like that. Yeah. But equal number of men are also looking the other way on their wives' infidelity, simply because they know that that if they try to separate, the wife's going to file all these false cases. It's going to be difficult. The shame, the stigma, and they also have this idea in their head that they may go to jail for several years, which is incorrect notion, right? That, oh shit, for God knows what's going to happen. She's going to take half my property. She's going to send me to jail. My parents are going to end up in jail. None of these things happen, but they don't know the reality, so they kind of stick with it. People who do know the reality, a lot of times they look the other way, men, because they know that the wife will get complete custody of the child that they are very attached to, and they know I'll not be able to see the child's face for several years. And that is why they say, what she's doing, whatever she's doing, I love my child. I know that if I separate from her, she gets custody. And that is why I will still stick it out with her for the sake of the child/children.
Since you have access and privy to their inner lives, do the men also compulsively start cheating then, or they remain sexless?
See, I mean, like another, notion.
मैं इसलिए कह रहा हूँ because you are like the Census Bureau of divorces.
I'll give you my thoughts on it. I would say that it's not so easy for a man to cheat as much as it is for a woman to cheat.
Unless he pays for it, basically.
Unless he pays for it, sure. That's also there. Now, say as a divorce lawyer, I've not, unless it was something else. As a divorce lawyer, I've not had conversations with men about them paying for the affair, right? Paying for the
young companion, they suddenly find themselves in the arms of an Ashoka hotel, like something like that.
Sure. So I've not had those discussions with the client, right? A lot of times there is a lady who's sitting in my office along with the man. So there, that's like, she's my friend. She is, a well-wisher. She's an acquaintance. So those are things that sometimes, that kind of gives a little bit of a hint. But even then I say it's not my business. But if the topic does come up, right? Say, for example, can she and I get married right now while my divorce case is going on with the wife? Funnily enough, there have been a lot of occasions where women have booked consultations with me, and when they come to my office, they're there with the man and they say that I booked the consultation for my friend because I wanted him to consult you. So women are paying the lawyer for consulting their boyfriend's case because they are wondering when will he be able to get a divorce.
So that we can marry. What a fucking complicated world.
Happens all the time.
No, but tell me about the men with their guilt-ridden faces as they say, I have cheated now we're getting a divorce.
See, single men or at least bachelors, when we think about the shame or the guilt of infidelity, is very different from what, especially married people. And again, this is my bias against married people because I think of them as complete fools, right? Because of the aforementioned reasons. For women, it's bad because of society. For men, it's bad because of the law. I look at them as idiots. But when I listen to their justifications, men and women, people are not, when they're entering a room or when they're holding hands with somebody else or, clothes come off and they're embracing each other, they're not thinking, oh, I am committing adultery. I am cheating on my husband. I am cheating on my wife. This is illegal. This is immoral. They're not thinking any of these things. There is a certain, how do you say it? Reptilian instinct.
Yeah, you follow your base instinct.
Plays out. And I see a lot of times what happens is that the rationalization comes post facto. Right? After the event, there is sometimes there is guilt.
Is that post-cheating clarity?
Yes, exactly. Are we allowed to say post-nut?
Yeah, bro, of course.
Yeah. So post-nut clarity, sure. Is post-nut clarity is there.
आलू के पराठे बनाती हूँ. ये क्या कर लिया?
Sure. So, and a lot of times then people will backward rationalize. He said this to me on that day. That's why I did this. A huge thing which you mentioned was, I know for certain that my wife is cheating on me, so it's okay for me to cheat on her as well. I know for a fact that my husband is cheating on me, so it's okay if I cheat on his wife. Or I'm sure that he must be doing it. Must be doing it. So when they say I'm sure that he's doing it, he's actually not doing it a lot of time, right? But they are able to easily kind of self-rationalize and say that, oh, this must have happened. I think that's how they kind of tell themselves later that it's okay for me to do it.
Custody को लेके Indian courts पे generally, where is the inclination toward?
100% women. 100% women. When a man asks me, what are the chances of me getting custody of the child? I tell them point blank. Especially below 7 years of age, your child will only come into your hands if your wife is in jail or if your wife is committed in a mental institution. Apart from that, you have video proof of her beating the child. It is irrelevant. She has no means to, provide for the child. She is going to ask you for money from the court, through the courts, to give her money so that she can maintain the child. If, she is accused of some horrible crimes, but she's out of jail, there is no circumstance in which you're getting custody of the child. Okay. You will get visitation rights, but that is also, it's very difficult for you to
actually visit your child.
Execute those visitation rights. You have to run around in courts quite a bit. There have been a couple of occasions where, like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 cases, not 1 in 100 cases I've seen, where the court strictly enforced visitation rights, right? And beyond 7, yes, beyond 7, but there's also this caveat. If you have the custody of the child at the time of separation, there is about a 20% chance you'll be able to keep custody of the child. But, if you do not have custody of the child at the time of separation, there's a 0% chance that you'll be able to keep custody of the child.
And it changes in teens, 13 to 17?
So the older the child grows, especially again after 7 years of age, the courts to a significant extent take into account the child's desires as well. But even 13, 14, yes, but hota kya hai na, by the time the child turns 12, 13, 14, you can't really force the child to stay with you, right? They have that kind of a thing that obviously it's not that
they have some agency of their own.
Because the judges listen to them quite a bit. But hota kya hai na, so whatever happens at the formative years of the child, right, in terms of who has custody, that kind of solidifies by the time the child turns 12, 13. Now, there have been occasions where the dispute between husband and wife started when the child was 12, 13. So, usme na, even the spouse is kind of a little apprehensive in moving for custody if they don't have custody at that point of time. Say, for example, I have a client who has custody of the son. The mother doesn't want custody. And she's also like, even if I try to get custody, I file cases, the judge is going to ask the child who is around 12, 13 years of age. There's no point. The child is going to say, I want to stay with my dad. Similarly, father who, is separated from the wife and the wife has the child. The father knows I'm going to file the case for the 12-year-old or 13-year-old child custody ka. What's going to happen is that the child is going to side with the parent with whom there's that attachment, that bond, and also that fear of abandonment that the child has, because of which even if they're treated poorly, it would be better for the other parent to have them. Even then they'll say, I want to stick with, either papa or mummy, the parent who has them right now.
Have you ever met ये जो इन divorce cases में unfortunately बच्चे फंस जाते हैं कि माँ बाप divorce कर रहे हैं, कभी वो आपके चेम्बर्स में आए, कभी आप उनसे मिले हो, और उनकी किस तरह से काउंसलिंग की जाती है अगर की जाती है तो? Again, I'm asking you to aggregate your experiences and tell me कि उन बच्चों पर generally क्या बीत रही होती है. Are some kids more receptive to this very horrible thing that is happening in their life? Do some kids break down? Are some kids very defiant and uncaring?
My thoughts on this are that children of separated parents can be as bad or as good as children of parents who are together, right? So I don't really see any distinction.
Bad, good की बात नहीं, मतलब कि that देखो, it is no doubt that for you it's business as usual. For people getting divorced, anyone in a court case in anything, it is a harrowing, stressful experience that eventually puts you into fight or flight. You're not there some zen person sitting कि मुझे कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, आपको बहुत परेशानी हो रही होती है. खासकर if it's a wife of 20 years, 15 years, और आप husband wife आप तलाक ले रहे हो और बच्चे भी हैं, बच्चे छोटे हैं for example, उस केस के अंदर उन बच्चों की जनरली मेंटल दशा क्या दिखती है आपको?
To be honest, I must confess, I've never really examined it from that angle. It's for me, it's always so much hyper focus on the case and what's in front of me, the situation, the facts, using the kids as pawns, right? And a parent who's maybe genuinely, who genuinely cares about the child, and so they are discussing their situation. So it's always about the whole situation from the lens of the parent, not the child, right? On a couple of occasions, now that you mention it, I've had a couple of my associates who work for me. They talk about welfare of the child. 1 or 2 times it's happened among hundreds of cases that perhaps an associate will say, sir, we are seeking custody of the child, but perhaps it would be in the better interest of the child that the custody stays with the opponent, for whatever reasons. I honestly have never really kind of examined it from the angle of what's, happening with the child. But my personally opinion, Vinamre, is always that when I say bad, I meant traumatized, right? Their situation is as good or bad as any other child. For example, I have this friend who laments that she had a bad childhood because her parents are loving and supportive and caved into every single demand of hers.
ये क्या बात है?
And so nobody ever set her straight. So that was the trauma that she felt was inflicted upon her.
Yeah, I
that
don't
she was mollycoddled too much.
See, mollycoddling, I still believe anyone who's mollycoddled, anyone who's privileged, they can understand that it exists and then manufacture things in their life that prevents them from fully actualizing that. And then in their later life, strategically use their privilege to their advantage with their own skills. It's called being street smart and rich.
Right.
It's something that people don't realize. I see. Yeah. Now I'm going to move away from marriage and divorce for a bit and ask you other questions around laws that I had, and then you will promptly end this riveting discussion. So I want to get into a few things, mostly because एक recently बड़ी fucked up. If you're okay talking about this, we can talk about it. हम लोग हटा देंगे इसको, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Some dude did some bestial acts on a cow. And वो वीडियो बड़ी सर्कुलेट हो गई थी. उसने गौशाला में एंटर करा, he started like having sex with the cow, right? And then there are numerous clips circulating around stray dogs being mauled to death by annoyed neighbors. उसकी morality क्या है क्या नहीं है वो बड़ी complicated है. Because while there is a genuine concern that strays can eventually attack you, some of them are innocent. But the pro-animal lobby is very aggressive and very vicious, and in some cases rightly so, because harm was done. पर ये इंडिया के अंदर bestiality या फिर harm against animals की क्या laws हैं अगर हैं तो?
So earlier bestiality was covered under section 377 IPC. Acts against the carnal course of nature, something like that. That has been done away with very recently with the BNS. So right now, inflicting sexual trauma upon an animal, I believe, is not a punishable offense right now.
What are you saying?
Yes. There are gaps in the laws of all sorts, right? This is one of them.
So this is a happy day for goat fuckers in the country,
I guess. Second, murdering or torturing animals. Again, it's a very sad state of affairs. I agree that the animal, rights communities are very angry, and I agree rightfully so. It is abhorrent to consider that a living creature, but then again, now if you think about it, then there is the whole, if you're consuming meat, if you're,
that's why it's
to what
ethically
extent?
complicated, because whenever I try to lampoon these pro-animal persons, and I hang out with just as many animals in my life, right? I end up meeting so many stray dogs, cats, right? एक बड़ी vitriolic streak है pro-animal वालों के अंदर, but at the same time, it's so complicated because you also see people who are like, वो कुत्तों की पूंछ पकड़ते हैं, उनको घुमाते हैं, लिटरली उनको जला देते हैं, सिगरेट मार देते हैं. तो इस तरह की चीजें होती हैं. तो are there any, you're saying with BNS there is nothing right now?
For bestiality, for sexual intercourse or sexual assault on any animal, there is nothing right now. However, but you know what, I'll have to double check it.
No problem,
because
no
section 377's contents were deleted. I'm not sure if BNS has something for animals. I don't know for sure. But last I checked, IPC, I think even causing murder of an animal is punishable with, there is no even jail sentence, I believe. So, you can commit murder of an animal. Now again, are chickens not being murdered? Are, goats not being murdered?
So you have to sort of figure out what is not livestock, and then what is religious livestock.
As PETA says, who do you find cute and who do you not find cute? So, and it's very difficult for meat eaters to kind of, grapple with this as well. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian and then you want to talk about animal slaughter or cruelty upon animals, it's very complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. So
we have no problem with, say, the jhatka method or the halal method of bleeding an animal to death. But on the other hand, if we commit the murder of, a dog or a cat, that somehow, again, I have no rational way of vocalizing it. I also myself feel furious, right? But how do I justify this when I myself consume, animals? So,
since pedophilia is on the rise in the US, and I would not say on the rise, it's the US is a society जहाँ पे pedophilia को बहुत aggressively pursue करके मारा जाता है. Sex offenders के ऊपर shows आते हैं, right? There is literally a show called To Catch a Pedophile. India में the word pedophile has just recently come around into common parlance where everyone uses it, knows what it is, and that too in the upper echelon of society. अगर आप किसी गांव के इंसान से बोलोगे कि पेडोफाइल क्या होता है या उसका कोई हिंदी वर्ड है, उसको नहीं पता होगा. लेकिन ऑलमोस्ट सबको पता है पॉक्सो एक्ट के बारे में. तो करंटली इंडिया के लैंडस्केप के अंदर पेडोफिलिया पे क्या प्रकार के लॉज हैं, कितने इफेक्टिव हैं, कितने नहीं हैं?
Very effective. Prevention or protection of children from sexual offences, the POCSO Act, is very powerful. Most occasions, everybody takes this very seriously. Big cities, small cities, if the child has the courage to report it. If they don't report it, then it just, trauma that they collect and talk about it in therapy 20, 30 years down the line. But if they have the, courage to report it, and again, there are a lot of parents, it is abhorrent that the parent says that if this ever comes out, it's going to bring shame upon the family, so let's not report it
that's
as
the
well.
plot of Highway. Yeah.
So, but if the child reports it to the parents or to the authorities, or if the child reports it to the parent goes to the authorities, very strict action is taken. People go to jail, very strict. Bail becomes very difficult, right? Lawyers will often talk about the difficulty in obtaining bail in POCSO matters, and they'll also celebrate the fact that they were able to get a bail in POCSO matters. And I'll get to the reason why. I'll get to the reason. I sound like a jackass in this moment, but I'll explain why. The thing is, I would say, in a certain sense, POCSO is a little too effective, and I'll tell you why. The level at which I am seeing it being weaponized is also very concerning. Now, again, I say it with a lot of risk because I understand, as I mentioned earlier, right? We keep as a society swinging from, pendulum, from one swing to another.
In general, there is no negotiation over any child being harmed sexually by an adult. ये तो हम सब जानते हैं.
Let's be clear on that. But to what extent will we as a society stand and say that even if a child falsely accuses a man, or a woman for that matter, that's what I'm saying. It's a little too effective because now, just as with the women protection laws, just as with SC/ST Act, right? POCSO has become a horrific tool, very effective, horrific tool to file false cases. Case in point, there's one thing that I still sometimes lose sleep over, the triviality of the matter escalating into such a level. I had this person consult me who told me his brother was working as a school teacher somewhere in Haryana. The brother's wife was operating a small kindergarten school about 100 kilometers away in a different city altogether. The parents of this one kid, about 4 years old, enrolled this child with the play school. And after 4 days, they come and say, please refund the money. We don't like the play school. The woman says, sorry, no refunds. And they say that the consequences will be grave. Please refund the money. Now, this was around 3 or 4 years ago. So I don't remember the exact amount, but this was somewhere between 5,000 and 15,000 rupees. That's it. Between 5 and 15,000 rupees for that play school fees. The girl, now again, this is an allegation, but the facts are quite, lend credibility to that narrative, to that assumption that this is a false case, where the man works in a public school 100 kilometers away in a different city. The allegation is the very next day, the girl child, 4 years old, goes and says to in the police along with her parents that at this play school, a man took me inside an empty room and molested me. And then the police go and grab this man 100 kilometers away in a different city, and they keep him in custody. And these people consulted me 2 or 3 times on the phone because this was, somewhere in Haryana. Last I heard, that man was in custody for about 7-8 months at the very minimum. Right? In an allegation where the man works 100 kilometers away. Could it be true? Perhaps. But I am just working on the facts given to me by the family.
How do you get a 4-year-old child to confess these many things to a police person? Like
it is not too difficult. It is just tutoring the child. And again, the child does not need to be very detailed about it. It just has to be, one man took me at my play school.
And did something nasty. That's it.
And touched me inappropriately. That's all. Galat tarah chua. That's all that is needed. And this is not one. I have got several cases. I represented for a brief period of time a man who was accused again against under POCSO and attempt to rape by his 16-year-old student. And again, the proof that he showed me, I know for a fact that this was a false allegation, because he reprimanded the girl in front of the entire class that you are, that you're a bad student, that you're an idiot, that you will never be something in life. She goes and says, that he took me into a room and molested me and attempted to rape me. The man was in custody for a couple of weeks, and now that case has been going on since about the past 7 or 8 years. And I have been told by numerous professors and school teachers that it has now become a proper industry. School children are told, especially from economically weak backgrounds, they are told that let's file a case of POCSO against your teacher for doing XYZ, and we'll be able to extort good money from them. It has become a good, legitimate, I mean, not illegitimate, but legitimately large, again, not legitimate, large, industry where this is taking place at a very large scale. Are there perpetrators? Yes. Your original question was, it's a very serious thing. Is it being taken seriously by the government, by the police, by lawyers, all the stakeholders? Yes, it is. But the potential for abuse is also something that I am dealing with on a very regular basis. I'm not saying that all cases are false, right? I have consulted a lot of people who were parents or relatives of the victim child. So I have seen both this thing.
Yeah.
But I must say that again, we have to be very careful and examining anything and pointing fingers and saying, he's a rapist, he's a molester, he's a pedophile. It's very easy for us to get carried away. Again, why? Because we think that what would happen if this happened to my child? What would I say, or what would I do, or how would I behave if this happened to my daughter, my sister, my bhabi, my mother? This is something that we have to be very careful of. Rather than jumping to conclusions, let's at least examine the facts. Let's examine everything and then come to a conclusion. So it's a big problem. But then again, the solutions need to be balanced as well. It cannot just be out, grab him, lynch him, etc.
This is probably the most, I think, difficult terrain we've crossed today because of the extreme taboo around even mentioning something like this.
Sure.
Because I think with pedophilia, the verdict has always been very clear and very strong. The fact that a very small chunk, sadly, is being weaponized to inflict pain. But I don't think ये फिर भी mainstream में जाएगा because the as you rightly said, the perpetrators are far too large, and maybe if this is even if this is a number of consequence, it is not like other movements where people should really investigate the other side. I will tell you for a fact, even after this podcast, people will simply dismiss this and even get very, very angry because it's one thing to talk about it, another thing to talk about a very uncomfortable part of it, right? So from that segue, I would like to ask you, since we're already on such macabre subjects, we started with divorce, right? We talked about bestiality and then pedophilia. What is your take on capital punishment in the country? Last I heard of किसी को फांसी की सजा हुई थी was 26/11 जो guilty था, Ajmal Kasad, he was hanged to death. After that, I haven't heard of any public cases that have come to me as a civilian where someone committed such a heinous crime that they were sentenced to death.
We can go into long academic debates about what the Supreme Court said,
what do
rarest
you
of
think?
rare cases, etc. Again, it's very difficult to come up with my own thoughts on this because, again, it's a very nuanced point, the way I feel.
Okay, let's change it. Have you administered or been a part of a case where there was capital punishment on the line?
Not yet. No.
Yet. Okay.
Murder cases, I have represented people. But again, I would say 1 in 1,000 cases, they will sentence the person to death. It is, there are always, it has to be rarest of rare, something which shocks the conscience of the society. So any of these murder cases that I have dealt with, the person, if convicted, got life imprisonment. Even if from the accused side or the victim side, the person's always gotten life imprisonment. There has never been a question of death sentence that I have dealt with till now, especially because it's very, 1 in 1,000 murder cases that the person is being sentenced to death, right? It has to shock the conscience of the people. All of these judgments talking about various factors. And even then, if a death penalty is imposed on somebody, it takes several years for, all the appellate process to be exhausted, presidential pardons, whatnot, at the end of the day to kind of come to that. And that's why we have very few executions as well. Should it exist is something that, is up for debate all over the world. There are some countries. I believe Singapore still practices death penalty, and huge chunk of Western world has done away with it. Obviously, USA, we keep watching. The great state of Texas is very happy to execute people all the time. There are many more states who do not want to execute at all, who've done away with execution. They all have valid points. People say that you keep the person in jail for the rest of their life. Why do you have to execute them? There is also a school of thought that says that, say for example, rape and murder, right? A lot of times or maybe robbery and murder, they say that they advocate that if the perpetrator knows that if convicted, I'll be sentenced to death, they will try harder to ensure that there is no witness that remains, right? So that's why they say that it's better to, in capital punishment places, the violence, the method of violence is far greater in comparison to other places where
I see
there is no capital punishment, right? So a person commits robbery and someone
and kills them also.
No,
yeah.
Let's say a person commits robbery and then they're running away. They're knowing the worst case scenario is that maybe I'll end up in jail for life, right? But if they know that there is a possibility I'll be sentenced to death, then they will say that now I might as well finish off the person and ensure, say for example, I stabbed somebody while robbing. Now, if I know that capital punishment is a possibility, I have already stabbed. He may die, he may not die. But if he dies, then I may be sentenced to death. So to reduce my chances of getting convicted, it's better that I now stab multiple times.
And ensure that
the person is dead, so that they can't testify against me. That is one reasoning that is mentioned by people against the death penalty. But there are a lot of people who also, I agree to a certain extent, if you do not have the provision for death penalty, there might be a propensity for greater violence to be perpetrated. We'll spend our time in jail, and we might even try to get out of jail at a certain point of time using some sort of a legal loophole and try to live our life. So it's a very balanced thing, and we've had, I believe there is a project 39A run by National Law University Delhi, in which they solely focus on trying to abolish the death penalty, and they make some very strong points. If people who are interested in reading about it, they can kind of follow up on a little bit of their material. They've tried to fight for commuting death sentence to life imprisonment for several, convicts. And then there are those who say this is something that you need to have. And India would, in India, they say that it should only be in the rarest of rare cases. It's not that every person who's convicted of murder is going to the gallows. Select few, maybe. To what extent do we as a society, say that Ajmal Kasab, terrorist, kills so many people and causes so much damage, strikes terror in our hearts, and then he gets to stay in a jail cell for the rest of his life. And then we are burdened with the costs of taking care of him.
Yeah, we're paying through taxpayers' money to care for a terrorist. It's not a criminal and a terrorist have vastly different connotations.
Terrorist can be someone who writes an email. Terrorist can also, terrorist can be someone dropping a nuclear bomb. And so, a guy like him, sure, I would say deserve the gallows.
2 questions. See, recently Maharashtra, the state we're sitting in now, has been very notorious for 2 major hit and run cases. So much so that sentiments of bar owners and waiters have been extremely nervous, afraid, even to the point of paranoia that they're checking IDs like they've never checked IDs. It's like you're going to an undergrad school in America and you're 18 years old and your fake ID won't never work because they have the strictest policies. Despite law कुछ भी बोले, arms and ammunition not allowed, tobacco और ये 25 साल की एज का जो लिखा होता है, हमें सबको पता है. India is a country where by and large people who are below the drinking age go drink their hearts out at 16, 17, 18, 19, 25 तो बहुत late होता है. तब तक तो mostly people are like basically done. Juvenile drinking is the norm in India, right? Despite what the law says.
But then again, isn't that the case across the world?
I would say in many European countries, for example, the drinking age is 18. Right? People drink at 18. But हमारे यहाँ पे 25 बहुत ज़्यादा है. वो मैं drinking age की बात नहीं कर रहा. मैं जिस मुद्दे पे आ रहा हूँ, मुद्दा ये है कि these hit and run cases, one is Mihir Shah, the other is Vedant Agarwal. Vedant Agarwal was a famous Porsche driver who, killed people in Pune. Mihir Shah is the son of a famous politician. He did the same in Mumbai, where for 1.5 kilometers, a woman was stuck inside the car wheels and kept rolling. आज तो उसको अरेस्ट कर लिया है मिहिर शाह को, फ्रॉम व्हाट आई नो. उसके ड्राइवर को यूजुअल कंप्लिसिट कर लिया, जो करते ही हैं अमीर परिवार. लेकिन दूसरे वेदांत अग्रवाल वाले केस में his mother replaced the blood samples, he was made to write an essay. The whole nation basically witnessed a mockery of the judicial system, the legal system, where once again, and this is my question, can the rich get away with tampering with justice and laws in broad daylight, and we can do diddly squat about it?
So, you narrated certain facts. Usme bhi, before answering this question, usme bhi I'd like to just give a few thoughts. Bombay case, I did not follow up properly, so I'm very bereft of the facts. The Pune case, a lot of people said that, oh, he was made to write an essay. Let's not lose sight of the fact that you are treated very differently as an adult in comparison to when you're not an adult. If you reference back to the Nirbhaya case, one of the rape accused persons was also below the age of 18. He was given the maximum possible imposable sentence, which was 3 years. And after 3 years in custody, he came out. Obviously, in fact, people lament that he was the one who actually committed the biggest atrocity, right? The rod and everything was done by him, but he got 3 years. And people were very angry. They brought in new laws. In the Juvenile Justice Act, I believe, they also, amended the laws because of that kid. They said that there are certain situations, if you are above the age of 16, we will treat you as an adult in certain offenses. One aspect is, so this is one aspect. Another aspect is, what is the maximum imposable sentence for not for drunken driving, but for death by rash and negligent act, as the statute calls it. Section 304A earlier, again, BNS, I'm not
sure. The BNS.
So, a lot of times people say, oh, hit and run case, the person died, and then how did this person come out on bail? This is not just for the rich and the famous. 304A is in fact a bailable offense, which means that you cannot be taken into custody. You are arrested on paper and then you're released. If it's just 304A, at least as it stood then. So a lot of people, they committed death, right? Death by rash and negligent act. So much so that, in order to kind of come up with a sense of justice, the Supreme Court also, I think, convoluted the law a little and interpreted it in a different way, saying that you caused a, death by rash and negligent act, which is punishable under 304A. It's a bailable offense. However, we say that if a person is inebriated while they cause that rash and negligent act, right, then we will impose 302 murder ka allegation, at least, as a prima facie this thing, right? Because we say that if you were driving while drunk, then we will assume that you understood that there is a very high likelihood that you are going to cause the death of a person, and therefore we will not call it just a rash and negligent act, but an act so malicious that death would be the cause. Do you see how they have added interpretation upon interpretation, which I'm not saying is, I say it's wrong, but I'm not saying that you should let a person go. I'm saying you should amend the law to make a proper punishment for 304A if it is a drunken driving, or maybe perhaps amend the Motor Vehicles Act to say that if you're operating a motor vehicle under the influence of, obviously there is a jail sentence if you are found operating, but it's a very, I think 1 month, 6 months, something like that. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I checked the Motor Vehicles Act. But why don't you add a provision under the Motor Vehicles Act that's saying that if you cause, say, grievous hurt while operating a machinery, and that too while you were inebriated, you'll go to jail for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and it's a non-bailable offense.
Yeah, 75% of Delhi would be in jail then.
As they should be. If you are doing drunken driving at the end of the day, I do say that you should understand that if you do cause death after, or you cause injury after being drunk, you are, I mean, why does the Motor Vehicle Act exist? It's a privilege to be driving down the streets. We cannot say that it's my fundamental right to drive a vehicle on the streets. It cannot be a fundamental right to drive maybe a Maruti 800 or a tank or anything in between on the streets, right? It is a statutory right that is given to us. And if we are, so that's the difference between, fundamental right inherently given by the Constitution and something which the legislature allows us to have. Motor Vehicle Act says you can drive if you have a license, if you've gone through the training, the documentation, everything. And as a natural extension of that, the Motor Vehicles Act itself, or maybe perhaps under any other relevant law, there should be a categorical punishment for these kind of things rather than importing these interpretations left, right, center and going over there. Now, coming to the more meaty question that you had, which is, can the rich and the famous get away? They often have, since time immemorial, they often have, right? We talked about hit and run. A great example is one person that was mentioned in this podcast, in the past few hours. One person was accused, right?
Course,
insidiously.
yeah.
Let's not even name names, otherwise
Yeah,
we both.
That is so hard to find that story even now.
Yes,
but people
agreed.
still remember. They even say it
Sure.
like they say the name of Voldemort. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, you must not be named. And that was a great example. If it did happen,
Yeah.
it's a great example of how you can manage these things. Is it wrong? Of course. What do we do about it? To a certain extent, the press has been influential, instrumental, right? Jessica Lal murder case, it was only because of the efforts of the press
Correct.
that this whole hush acquittal was overturned and the man, spent several years in jail. That was a little semblance of justice. A lot of other occasions, now it's not just the press, it's the social media justice, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times the virality not by a journalist, but just by the regular Joe, right? Twitter justice is also incredible, right? I find it fascinating that you file a complaint somewhere and then you tag the police on Twitter, and if you get to a certain you cross a certain threshold, no matter how absurd your complaint is, because I say that out of every 100 complaints that are registered before the complaints that are filed with the police, out of every 100, I would say 1 out of 20 complaints are actually registered as an FIR. Okay, theft, robbery, false accusations, beatings, whatever. If you punch me right now, I go to the local police station and I say, I was hit by Vinamre Kasana, section 323, IPC, simple hurt should be. That's what happens. However, the smallest of offenses, the most minuscule of offenses, if they cross a certain threshold on Twitter, immediately police say, we will take action. An animal gets murdered, we will take action. What action are you going to take?
वही वाली बात है ना कि what people famously think of high profile cases and the role the media plays. The same thing is now a citizen can just boy who cried wolf it completely.
Absolutely.
Right? I know people who have actually gotten trash picked from a landfill in Gurgaon. Because वहाँ ज़्यादा था, वो लोगों ने रिट्वीट कर दिया. गुड़गांव के एफ्लुएंट रेजिडेंट्स ले दे के कभी एसपी को टैग करे, कभी कुछ करे, हटा उठवा दिया कूड़ा. I mean, it's very interesting how that happens. Like, one final question, Amish. We've sort of discussed this in our last conversation that happened years ago, but I will still say it, right? Because for me, the idea of a lawyer bending reality, bending rules is always fascinating to get their client justice. But I'm not going to ask you कि भाई आपको कैसी लगती है मोरालिटी जब आप रात को सोते हो कि मैंने आज इसको इंसाफ दिलाया, ये करा वो करा, या झूठ बोलना पड़ा. ठीक है, मैं वो सबको पता है क्या होता है, कैसे होता है. I'm going to ask you instead something else, which is, have you knowingly defended someone who was accused of a heinous crime and you know in your heart that it was true, that this person is a murderer or a rapist, and you still won the case?
I have never, ever represented a person who actually committed a heinous crime and then got him an acquittal. You asked me a question, I gave you the answer. I will say this. Certain boundaries are blurred, right? Certain legal strategies are employed. And so one aspect is, to what extent is my client guilty? So I'll give you an example. I had a client who, and because these lines are always blurred. Someone says, can you represent?
By the way, I just want to interject and say something in your defense, because I've put you on the spot and asked you this question. The lines are blurred in all professions. It's just that, when people say, I am, like, for example, in my profession, I am for the people. But am I really for the people, or am I for the money? Right? Politicians karte hain cheeze. So it's that because we are, again, dealing with something as sacred as justice, quote unquote. Lawyers particularly are put under that spotlight. Just want to say that, yeah.
So that's fine. But I see, you asked me a question, I gave you a very lawyer answer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay.
He never represented a person. Now again, let me rephrase it, right? This is the beauty of the English language.
Okay.
I have never represented a client who was accused of a heinous offense and got him an acquittal. Right? So again, I can play around with this, but I'll give you an example to illustrate.
Right.
For a brief period of time, there was a difficulty in commercials. That's why I was not able to represent the client. But brief period of time, this case came to me where there was a security guard who had been issued a licensed rifle. Security guard, right? By the security company. Now he shows up to work one day drunk, and his supervisor is screaming at him. And now this guy is drunk. He doesn't understand what's going on. And now the supervisor is screaming for 5 minutes non-stop. This guy takes out the rifle, point blank from a distance of about 2 feet away, fires. The guy is dead. This drunk old security guard, mind you, age plays a factor. He's around 65 years of age. Drunk, poor, keeps the rifle down, sits there on the floor. While the other people call the cops show up and they're like, bhai, what happened? And then they carry the dead body and this man away. To what extent is he guilty? To what extent should we say that now this man should spend the rest of his whatever years left in jail? To what extent what is my role as a lawyer? And so I grappled with this for a moment, especially because there are no two thoughts about it. It's not that somebody else, shot the guy. There is a dead body. It's not that somebody else shot him, because we have CCTV footage.
Right. And there is a person
clear faces
who no longer is living for the Aadhaar card that he has.
Correct. Now, I grappled with it for a brief few moments. To what extent am I supposed to try and save this man who is clearly guilty of this offense? And it was a very short, this thing, because again, the commercials didn't work out. But my solution was, okay, I try to put up the best possible defense. I do my duty. And also, I am in the arena and I am practicing. You know what I mean? I am going through my daily practice. If I slack off on this one case thinking ye to hara hua case hai, what is going to be my outlook on the next case? Where perhaps the client is innocent, but they don't have enough proof, or we have a weak case because of the circumstances. Right. So I have to practice my craft to the best of my ability. I put up the strongest defense possible. And no matter what, I have to ensure that this does not show up as a rarest of rare cases. And that the person ends up, hung by the neck. That should definitely not happen. And I do my best. I try my best. And at the end of the day, have I seen innocent people go to jail? Yes. Have I seen guilty people stay out of jail? Yes. A lot of times, process becomes punishment for the guilty as well. That is why on a lot of occasions, judges and the police know that the person is guilty. But they also know that there is not enough proof. Or they think, then what do they think? They think, let's deny bail. Ultimately, he'll get an acquittal, but let him spend a couple of months in jail to serve his punishment. That's one aspect. Another aspect is the person's completely innocent, and the judge and the police can say and can see. This is what happened. I argued a bail application one occasion, and I showed the judge what I believe to be, very concrete evidence that he was not even at the scene of the crime when the murder took place. And what the judge said me while denying anticipatory bail to my client? The judge says, Amish ji, देखो, 302 के केस में फंसा है, 3 और लोग थे जो अभी जेल में, ये चौथा है. मे बी इसने ये ना किया हो. दिस इज व्हाट ही सेड इन ओपन कोर्ट, बट एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम वीडियो रिकॉर्डिंग्स, वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग डिड नॉट हैपन. नाउ डेज नो जज सेज दीज पॉलिटिकली इनकरेक्ट थिंग्स. दैट टाइम ही सेड, अमीश जी देखो 3 तो बंद हैं ही, मर्डर तो हुआ है, अब ये चौथा आदमी मे बी इसने ना किया हो, पर देखो जिंदगी में कुछ ना कुछ तो कर्म ऐसा किया होगा ना कि यहाँ खड़ा हुआ है. तो अब देखो जी 302 है तो मैं तो नहीं दूंगा जी एंटीसिपेटरी बेल. आप देख लो, बाद में देखना, एक बार थोड़ा टाइम काट के आ जाए जेल में, उसके बाद वील कंसिडर. बट देखो एंटीसिपेटरी बेल हमारा देना बनता नहीं है. दिस इज व्हाट अ दिल्ली सेशंस कोर्ट जज टोल्ड मी while dismissing the anticipatory bail application. So this is how the circumstances are. It's very easy for someone to say, how can you defend someone who is... I'll give you another example. I don't know if I've talked about it because this happened many, many years ago and I've talked about it on a couple of occasions. I had this one client who was the father of the deceased, right? I was representing the victim, the deceased victim. So the father told me the story. There were 2 boys, A and B, in Rohtak, Haryana, right? My father's hometown. A and B were fighting, and so like one guy shoots at the other, and because he shoots at the other, he goes to jail for arms act and attempt to murder. In the jail, the guy dies, and the family of the deceased, the person who died in jail, they think that because our son or whatever, our relative shot at this guy and then ultimately went in jail, this guy must be the one who got our son murdered in jail. And so now they all arm themselves up, 10, 15 of them. On the night of Diwali, they show up and they murder this other kid who was shot at earlier. We don't know whether he was the one who got the guy murdered or not. Now, all out of 10, 15 of them, 7 or 8 of them were facing murder trial. Right? At that point of time, I stepped in for a brief period, in one of the appellate hearings. And I keep thinking about it. Okay, they are accused of murder. They should all go to jail, but should they spend their entire life in jail because they committed an act under this assumption, maybe correct, maybe false, that their child was murdered by the opponent? So lines are always blurred. It's never so simple. And again, now another thing is, okay, someone committed, what about this? Someone, and again, I know it's very easy to get into whataboutery, but someone, as we talked about the perilous state of young advocates or lawyers all over the country who resort to unethical means. Someone who is... Have you read the book The White Tiger?
Yes, of course, love it. Favorite book.
So to what extent will you... Mine too. The fact I've read it maybe many years ago.
2008 में आई थी ना, 2008 की मैन बुकर प्राइज जीती थी वो.
हाँ, ऐसे तो बहुत टाइम पहले.
Yeah.
So if you remember the ultimate ending, to what extent will you say that you should lock this man up and send him to jail for the rest of his life?
Look, the way the author portrays it, it's a hero's journey, because you also think about it, the fact that once he does it, spoiler for people, nasty things, although said very ambiguously, also happen to his family elsewhere in the darkness.
We can assume, yes.
We can assume. उसमें लिखा होता है. But it's the way, if you were to use a lawyer's perspective and say the narrator was his own lawyer, bro, the argument is he came from such darkness. He made the most of it, got very entrepreneurial, and he figured that he had to do it. He had to, do what he had to do. Yeah.
So you would make a fantastic advocate as well.
Yeah. I wish. I will say one thing before we part, though. If there is something I have truly come to admire about lawyers in this country, which is not said enough, is that we often attribute verbal prowess to journalists and broadcasters. We often attribute linguistic acumen to writers, right, and columnists. But I think if there is one dangerously articulate weapon, a class of man or woman that can do both and infinitely better than both of these people I mentioned, is the lawyer of this country. I really, really believe that. The way a lawyer can, on command, make his language precise or extremely imprecise, depending on whatever, need he's serving at that time. how a lawyer can spin statements into nothingness and trap you in legalese and at the same time give you precise clarity while never losing his train of thought while also adding nuance. ये सिर्फ lawyers कर सकते हैं और आज आपने करके मुझे दिखा भी दिया.
Very kind of you.
So that is something I do want to say about lawyers because I think for people जिनके वहाँ lawyer है उनको तो पता, उनको तो normal अच्छा लगता ही है, लेकिन बाकी सब लोग ना अक्सर ये चीज़ बोलते हैं कि कभी भी आपकी lawyer से दोस्ती दुश्मनी बुरी रहती है. अक्सर this is a slur that people often
They say it about lawyers and about police officers.
Police officers, correct. So I will say that it is a vilified community of people and while some evidences are right, I don't think people often give credit to lawyers about not only just the massive service they do, even for money, to move the painful grease, the rusty grease of our justice system, but also what they do for our intellect and intellectual acumen. तो मैं आपको ये कहना चाह रहा था.
Thank you.
और बाकी, since we're at the end, where can people find you? Where can people see your work if they want to follow your stuff and not get caught by the police? If they're smoking in public, most popular videos में what to say when police says पापा को phone करेंगे. Something recently happened with me where they were saying that to me. I started laughing. करते हो भाई.
Yeah, so I mean, the social media is there. I guess you could put in the link.
Yeah. Amish Agarwala, right?
Yeah. But I also wanted to say that Vinamre and I had a very good podcast on an earlier occasion, although you mentioned it, but for whoever has not watched it, it was and this was something that, I also I've watched it a couple of times and I've tried to see my own evolution from those times in terms of my thought process about everything, which obviously is constantly evolving as well. So, if you want, you can maybe check that out as well.
It's on the older channel. It's a channel called Vinamre. You'll have to look through it. It's one we did on Zoom during the pandemic. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. ठीक है, but thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure, Rod.
It's always a pleasure to interact with you in the few times we've had through our mutual friends as well. ठीक है, this was Amish Agarwala on Dostcast. We'll see you all on the next episode. Take care. Bye bye. Sayonara. Jai Hind. Subscribe करना मत.